Don't shit in people's beds. That's what you should do.
Certainly don't do that.
Can we start there?
Not.
Can we start there?
Yes, we definitely should. Don't be surprised that everybody's going to find out that you're a horrible person after you shit in someone's fucking bed. Of course they're going to find out you're a horrible person. Look what you just did.
All of this thing that Randall Flagg has built out of fear and deception, if you see this guy for what he's really doing and the ways in which he's trying to deceive you for his own ends, if you just let that all go, he loses his power. Is the 2020 edition of The Stand, as seen on Paramount Plus, a Palmer's pick?
Oh!
Greetings! Dave here to welcome you to Long Walk Short Drink episode 90, as in 1990, the year that gave us Goodfellas, Rocky 5, which I wish I still had on VHS instead of this DVD from a box set. I can still picture Rocky, with the bruised face going like this. I actually might still have that poster. But I do not still have that VHS. I'll tell you what I do have a VHS of from 1990, Death Warrant, Jean-Claude Van Damme's prison movie. And I'll tell you what, I watched this for the first time in HD within the last 2 weeks. I had my first night alone as a bachelor for an evening since the pandemic, and I was like, what am I going to do with this bizarre free time? and so I decided, well, I'm going to watch Death Warrant. I even took a video of me watching the opening of it through a haze of Surly Furious. Perhaps I'll tweet that on the Long Walk Short Drink at LWSD Pod on Twitter. What else came out in 1990? Home Alone. Yeah, I still have this VHS. We also watch it every Christmas. I quoted it in the last 2 days. Love it. Edward Scissorhands. How about that? Johnny Depp, who comes up in this episode. It is Tim Burton heyday. Winona Ryder as well. State of Grace. The Irish... Oh, my VHSs are falling. The Irish Mob in New York. This stars Gary Oldman, Sean Penn, Robin Wright Penn, Ed Harris, and is directed by Phil Joannou, the film he made after doing the documentary sort of grand cinematic portrait of U2. Oh, Rattle and Hum. It gets a bad rap, but... This is a little scene movie that is really, I think, pretty excellent, and is actually one of my Palmer's picks. When Palmer did his 1999 cable access show, this was my appearance, one of my 3 movies I brought on. And you know what? It's not public yet, but just because I love you guys, I'm going to post an unlisted private Vimeo link to that video, my 1999 appearance with Palmer. This was the earliest prototype of Long Walk Short Drink. So I'll put it in the description notes of this episode. And you can hear me talk at length about State of Grace with Palmer. Not really at length, like we do on this show. This was a half-hour cable access show. So also 1990, Pump Up the Volume. Now, I didn't see this till a couple years later, but when I did, I may have done my own cassette, pirate radio program, which I talked about the trials and tribulations of not high school, but middle school in my best Christian Slater voice. And yeah, that's on the internet too. It's called Mark the Dark. And you know what? Because I love you guys, I'll put a link to the previously and maybe still, what is it? Anonymity through Obscurity. I'm going to put a link to a playlist of those taped episodes. Oh my God. Just because why not? Because it's up there. Also 1990, Brendan Lee's first English film starring role, Brandon Lee in type thing. Laser Mission. Look at this cover. It kind of tells you everything you need to know. This movie is not good, but it is kind of a lot of fun. Like, it would be great. I don't know if it is, but it should be definitely on one of those riff tracks or How Did This Get Made or something like that. There's some fun things about it, but anyway, so that came out in 1990 as well. David Lynch's Wild at Heart won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Man, what is this snakeskin jacket? This snakeskin jacket is a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom. Recommend this. In television, David Lynch was taking over, changing the face of television that year as well. Twin Peaks premiered on, I want to say ABC. I don't know, it doesn't say it on this. But yeah, a masterpiece. I'm not sure where you can watch it these days, but I'm sure it's out there, and it is goddamn magnificent. Especially the pilot episode, which is like a 2-hour movie. It was kind of released on home video as a 2-hour like self-contained movie that I believe played in Europe that actually sort of wraps up the storyline in like a 15 minutes extra. That's not. And anyway, getting off topic here, but also in television, Beverly Hills 90210 premiered. And I might, Jesus, what's got into me today? Yeah, I might be rewatching the series before bed a little bit at a time. And I'm like up to the 5th episode or something like that. I don't know. I haven't been counting, but self-disclosure. Anyway, also in 1990, the Stephen King's It. Well, I didn't see this like when it came out, but we have talked about it, of course, on this show. What else? So in music, 1990. In 1990, this tape is a replica of the tape that resulted in Pearl Jam. So I'm not going to tell the whole story, even though this is Long Walk Short Drink, but a tape of demos made its way out to San Diego, where a young surfer and musician named Eddie Vedder went out surfing one morning, and the song Alive kind of sprung to his mind from these instrumentals. He made a tape with like artwork. He sent it for, you can see on the video version of this, for Stone and Jeff, and then it was like taped over what is this? Oh, it doesn't say. It's kind of neat. Like, anyway, you can see he used he taped over a commercial tape, but he used whiteout to everything except for A Friend from California, which is If I Knew the Band, or the title. And then all of these letters down here, you can unscramble to read Eddie. You can see his face there in a photocopier, as well as the date, 9/13/1990. This tape came with the reissue of their first album. And speaking of first albums, Ani DeFranco's first album came out in 1990. I haven't heard this in ages. I think there's a remaster online. Perhaps I'll check that out. She's still kicking ass. Phil Collins, Serious Hits Live. Now, let me... I realize it's perhaps not cool to like Phil Collins, but when 1990, I would have been like 10 and 11. I think Jacko, our buddy Jacko, who we've yet to wrangle onto the podcast, but comes up a lot, I think he liked Phil Collins and had this tape. And so, oh man, I don't know if I can share this one with you, but it is up there at that Dreaming Out Loud Mixcloud site. We did a radio show, he and I, that this was large. There were a lot of songs from this Phil Collins Seriously Live album. It's called WDMS, and I better leave it at that, I guess. But looking at these songs, I'm gonna listen to this. The bride was my wife. The bride was listening to In the Air Tonight. She was getting ready. Oh, that's not 1990 related, so I guess I can't tell you. But that, you know, as you know, we're not talking about any of that stuff. Just like we're not talking about the 100th year anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. But I do recommend you look into that if that does not ring a bell. I never heard of it until I watched, it was the opening scene of Watchmen, the HBO series. And I won't get into it too much. It's pretty damn important. Look into that. I'll tell you what we are talking about. We are talking about something that does have a 1990 connection. And that is, we are talking today about the 2020/21 CBS All Access / Paramount Plus miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. And I know what you're saying. What the fuck does that have to do with 1990? I'll tell you. This book that I'm holding, the, what do they call it? The complete and uncut hardcover of The Stand was published in 1990. And the ending here is different in this version than in the original one that came out in the 70s, and is pretty much replicated in the televisions in the 2020 version of the series we're going to talk about today. And we're going to be doing that joined by Palmer's lovely bride, Ash. And if you know the history of the show a bit, it already came up in terms of like our past, Palmer and I, but Palmer's Picks, was once this cable access show in which Palmer would invite on a guest to talk about three films of theirs to find out if they would be, if he liked them as well, and whether or not they were Palmer's Picks. And since Ash's star turn talking about Get Out with Palmer early in our run, we now have a recurring segment that we haven't done in ages called Palmer's Pick, where the apostrophe moves over to the other side of the S to include the plural, and we bring in this very welcome guest to the show to lend a female perspective, and it is always a treat, and I had a lot of fun. I talked their ears off. I think it was Palmer's idea that we watch this together, and I think around hour 4.5, he was starting to be like, oh, why did I suggest this? But actually, it was a 4.5 hour conversation, but we talked about The Stand in the second half of it, and so that's what I'm going to present to you today. The first half of it, we talk with Ash and Palmer about their intermittent fasting practices, as well as some ways that they've kind of rearranged their life and their home to try to institute some changes, positive changes in their life that I've been inspired by and wanted to talk about with them more, as well as share with you. And so that will be the next show. But this one, we're talking about The Stand. But first, I want to tell you quickly about a couple things that people in the Long Walk Short Drink community have made. Incidentally, if you're a listener and you make stuff, why don't you tell us about it? I'll read it on one of these openings. Why not? My brother Moto, who contributed years ago the rock and theme music that you hear at the beginning and end, has released some new music under his one-man band name, The Fascist Puppeteer, and it is called the EP is called Red Eye Highway Session. And it is on dreamingoutloudrecords.com for free, as well as streamable wherever you get your music, on your iTunes, your I don't know, Amazon, Spotify, all that stuff. YouTube, you can find it. You should listen to it. If we had a break in this episode, I would play it as a song from the break, but since we don't, and I was going to maybe put it as underscore here, but I feel like that is not necessarily the kind of attention it deserves. So I'm telling you, you must check it out. I think my favorite is actually, of the songs on it, is Coda, the last song, which is an instrumental, but really cool. Got some really cool riffs and stuff going on. So great work there. Actually, beautiful cover art from our old buddy and Phil Collins fan, Jacko. Check that out. dreamingoutloudrecords.com. It's the latest release there. Fascist Puppeteer, Red Eye Highway Session. And so I myself have been working on something that is not quite completely done, but by the time I talk with you next time, there's something else I want to share that will be done by that point. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there now. And that is, I've been kind of building out my website, davidallman.net, with sort of the film projects that I've done over the years as I work towards some in particular. And the one that I finished most recently was a documentary called Steve Finding Rhythm. Now, what this is quickly is when I was 21, myself and a bunch of our friends who generally played music individually, we'd sing songs around the campfire at the cabin, like one at a time. One of us, thank God, Logan, who'll be on the next episode, he played drums and so percussion, and so he thank God was sort of the anchor that allowed us to actually have a band that we jokingly referred to as Steve. And so this documentary was filmed in this summer of 2000, and put together in 2004, and is really one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I think because I was finishing it kind of to get it, I don't know, just kind of get it out of my system, and then I was moving right into like my solo career playing music, and so I didn't really try to do much with it. I didn't enter it in indie festivals or anything like that, but I think it's a really interesting kind of portrait of young people. Like, we were just a little too old, I think, to be starting a band like this, too busy in our lives, but like the culture of creativity around our group of friends was such, and my job working at the Cable Access Center kind of facilitated. That was like the only place we could practice, and if you use that facility, just like with Palmer's Picks or whatever, you're supposed to, you can't make any money, but you have to provide them with programming. And so this was obviously seen by me as an opportunity, and I got folks to kind of follow us around and film sort of documentary type stuff, and from the outset intended to create a documentary around what we were doing. And it was the first time that enterprise facilitated the creative undertaking that we were. I don't think we'd have been able to have this band if it weren't for that documentary. Anyway, it's a lot to explain, and I go into great detail on the website with a kind of an essay form, and that's what I'm almost finished with. So depending on when you visit it, davidallman.net under the film tab, or directly at davidallman.net/finding-rhythm, you can see this trailer, newly assembled trailer, 3-minute trailer for that documentary that I think distills like kind of what it's about, and gives you a flavor of it. It's hilarious. It's this portrait of creativity and the obstacles that people face to kind of, dream out loud, as I like to say. And anyway, so that's something I wanted you to know about. I am going to put the 3-minute trailer as the Dreaming Out Loud archive outro segment. So stay tuned for that after the discussion here with Ash and Palmer about The Stand. And so without further ado, I'm just going to throw it over to us from last weekend, I guess, from May 29th, 2021. This is myself, Ash, and Palmer talking about the 2020-21 adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. Okay, so I've got this like episode guide, and these are short sentences, not even like the kind I would write. So they might be a guide through some of this, but to kind of kick us off too, I was curious. You Ash had never read the book, never had probably a limited understanding of what the story might be. Were you like, oh, don't watch that without me, I want to see this too? Because how did it come to be that you watched it together?
He asked if I was interested. He told me that we were going to have to subscribe to CBS All Access because he wanted access to The Stand. And then I think I might have watched the trailer on my own, and I was really intrigued with this might sound kind of lame, but I like The View. Some episodes of The View I will watch on YouTube.
And sure,
clips of the host talking, and Whoopi Goldberg being on it. She is still on it, and I just like hearing her opinions about things, and I like hearing her talk about things. And she spoke very passionately and very energetically about her experience working on The Stand, and she even called out and said, my job is doing a really awesome thing by allowing me to go work for this other network. And she feels like she had passed by the opportunity to be in The Stand a couple decades ago. Like, I guess when they tried to do a reboot once before, and they tried to get her on board to play this part, and she turned it down. And so she had said, or there was a conflict or some reason that she couldn't do it. So she said in that moment, and in an interview with Stephen King, like, if there's ever another opportunity, please ask me again. Like, I would love to be a part of this. And this was her opportunity. And ABC Studios, who she works for, ABC Universal, whatever the company is, could have said no. And they're allowing her to work with CBS to produce this. And that was like back when she's like a CBS streaming opportunity something whatever, like didn't even have like the right word to call it, because like CBS All Access or whatever they ended up calling it didn't know the name at the time, I guess. So that part was funny, but knowing how excited she was to do it made me watch the trailer and learn more about it. And then I asked him, and then he was like, well, if you're interested, like you can watch it and we could talk about it. So I think that's how it happened. Is that accurate, babe?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I knew I was going to watch it one way or another.
Well, that's true.
It's always, I'm sure this is probably, well, maybe not so much for you, Dave, because you're really good at finding the time to watch that. I feel like if we don't watch it together, I'm just not going to ever watch it.
Oh, no, I relate to that 100%. There are the only television series that is a new TV series and not something I watch, just sort of nostalgic, like to kind of have on for comfort before I go to sleep, is Warrior. But there are series, tons of series that I would like. And there's that one that's like all like Frankenstein, that was Penny Dreadful. And we started to watch it together, the bride and I, and when she was out, I was like, shit, I'm never going to see this because I'm not going to make the time. So it is a big thing. And actually, I don't know that I would have seen this if the bride didn't surprise me by being like, because I was a little reticent. 2020 was tough, and a lot of the things that were brought up were really difficult. They're still difficult. And this just hit so close to home with this.
Yep.
What I knew the stand to be ultimately too, because when I read it or listened to it, etc., it was like 2016 probably ish. So I was already drawing some parallels to some things that we experienced in America and a lot of people across the world. But anyway, so I was just like, oh man, I was just not. It was a difficult sell, and I actually haven't really engaged with Stephen King much in the last throughout 2020. I think the last even fiction book I read would have been like Christine in my Stephen King chronology, and maybe like 2019.
That's a good one though.
Yeah. So I didn't coming into like a few years ago, when you guys first came out, and Palmer and I just so happened to be going through Stephen King's chronology, albeit at a very different entry points. I didn't have a background with Stephen King. It was a blind spot for me. It held no sort of nostalgia and a lot of like just gaps. Like I hadn't seen stuff, hadn't read stuff, didn't know about it, and have enjoyed it and been able to share it with Palmer these last few years. So I do now have like a soft spot for it. But even so, when he was like, hey man, I'm going to watch this, I'm excited. I was, I don't know. And that was kind of it for a while. But then we were finishing something, the bride and I was like, would you want to, because I thought she might be into it because of she loves The Walking Dead. And we talked about this in our actual stand recording episodes, 12 and 15 of A Long Walk Short Drink, where I was like, I feel in some ways like I've got a really good version of the stand through The Walking Dead. Because even though The Walking Dead has got this backdrop of zombies, it's really about the survivors and the dynamics and all of this.
Yep.
Sure.
And actually at that time in 2016, they were introducing the Negan character, who's got a very similar dynamic with his sanctuary. For anyone listening that knows that too, like what New Vegas was and this sort of ruling through fear type thing. It all just really resonated, even to the point where listening back to, and Palmer, you were saying like there's been very few really successful Stephen King adaptations, and most of them have been done by Frank Darabont. Frank Darabont developed The Walking Dead for television and essentially probably executed it like he might have the stand. So anyway, I thought she might be into it for that reason, and so I just floated it out there. I was like, would you maybe want to watch this? And she was like, actually I would. So I'm not sure if I would have seen it if my wife didn't kind of buy into it. So I relate to that wholeheartedly about whether or not I see something.
It just makes it easier to consume if you're both consuming the same thing. Like, because then you don't have to find TV time by yourself, and you don't, all that stuff. So,
and I think knowing that I have, in the course of our 8 years of knowing each other, have really allowed my stubbornness when it comes to TV and movies to be expanded a little bit. Like I'm much more willing to give something a chance than I probably would have been in 2013 when we first met and started watching things together. I think I was much more hesitant to say yes to something scary, especially. And there have been a lot of things that I've watched that I would say, hell no, I'm never going to watch that.
Yeah.
That I've really enjoyed.
And you've shared a lot of that in this context too on the show. And I think that's perhaps what led to us talking about it all together. I mean, as well as it's nice to have this kind of outsider perspective slightly to like the Stephen King of it all to kind of lend an objective point of view. But I also think too, basically, Palmer and I have talked about this incrementally. We were never quite at the same point in the show when we would talk about it. But some of what intrigued me so much was he's like, Ash has been really into this. And she would say like, after a couple days, I'm still thinking about this episode that we watched. And so, I'm especially interested to hear your reactions to all this. Okay, so we'll just maybe dive in here. So there's 9 episodes. We'll just see where this all takes us. The first one is called The End, and the single sentence synopsis is when the captain trips flu epidemic wipes out more than 99% of the population, the remaining few immune to the disease set out in search of other survivors. And as I recall, this one is pretty... I actually watched the recap. So CBS All Access, for those listening now, is called Paramount Plus. And so if you want to watch this, that's where you can find it. I watched the recaps like previously on the stand this morning, as well as the well sequence. But so this one is focused on Harold, Lauder, and I almost said Nadine, but it's Franny Goldsmith. Their characters, and then as well as a little bit cuts back and forth with Stu Redman. Those are the people we're introduced to. So what were your sort of initial reactions then? I guess this would be the first episode. So were you into it right away, Ash, or were you like, we'll see where this goes?
I think I was intrigued by the story. I feel like if the story is good, it sucks me in, and then I can there's obviously things that were uncomfortable about it, but I was into the story, so I was curious enough to see where it went and to stay engaged. And I like the way that I appreciate both versions. The way that they presented Harold's relationship with Franny was a little bit different in both versions, but I prefer the CBS All Access versus the 90s one, I think.
I think it's safe to say that these characterizations from the 2021 are going to appeal to us more because we're just living. They are more relatable to this time period.
Yeah,
I'm sure in 1994 we would have said the same thing. Like, would have preferred those.
That's true.
Those characters. So
that's a good point.
I think all of the characterizations were at least even if they didn't do the character justice in the actual show, the cast was cast phenomenally across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah. Even if they weren't, you mean like the book necessarily, they work really well within the show.
Yeah. Like that, that person does that character, does that character very well. Like, I'm not and I'm not trying to jump ahead because we're on episode 1, but like, Trash Can Man is a good example where I feel like that character kind of got gutted a little bit. Like they just didn't, and it makes it even worse because the guy playing him does such a fantastic job. I wanted to just see more of that character, I think.
Yeah. I'm not even, hesitate to be like negative because I pretty much have nothing but positive things to say about the new series. For some reason, like Ezra Miller, the actor, annoys me. Whatever, that just is what it is. Yeah. But I did think it was like an interesting and effective take on the character of just like this screeching, like feral, trash can man. The characters, the casting, I feel the same way. And actually, so I have this perspective too of what we talked about. If others listen to our other episodes, like I'll try to leave out a lot of the things, but one thing I thought would be interesting to share that I was reminded of was we did talk about the miniseries, I think, in the last like 40 minutes of the episode 15 of Long Walk Short Drink. And I think the parallel we drive to that, like how we might have felt about it then, as opposed to now, and in 2017 when that conversation was had, was like Molly Ringwald as Franny it's tough to take now and doesn't go over super well. But if you think about the relationship or who that character was in the book, in terms of like someone who might have been popular or really desirable by Harold in high school, that if you think about Molly Ringwald in 1994, basically 10 years out of being that kind of girl next door from the 80s, would probably have made a lot of sense.
Yep.
One of the things I really liked about this Franny was
Totally
that she
agree.
wasn't someone recognizable to us. And she was one of the most sort of everyday, earthy, kind of less movie star type character kind of vibe. Because that's kind of a leading lady role. And that's not to diminish or sort of denigrate Odessa Young here, who played
Odessa
it. But
Young,
you know, she didn't have like veneers. And, she sort of seemed like a real person in a really grounding way for the whole show.
Girl next door.
I'm looking through her filmography right now on IMDb, and like nothing jumps out at me.
Yeah, I'd never seen her before.
Yeah. But I agree, though. She is like cast perfectly. Like she did such a fantastic job as Fran. Yeah.
I like James Marsden too. I can't say I've ever particularly cared for James Marsden prior to this, who played Stu Redman. That's not maybe because he played like certain smarmy roles. I don't know why. I've never been like, I like that guy. And now I feel that way about him because of this show. I even saw him as a smarmy guy since then. I watched with the bride, we watched Dead to Me on Netflix, in which he plays just a terrible guy. Well, not a terrible guy, but kind of that's the general. He played kind of characters I probably haven't liked him as an actor for, because I associate him with. But now, because I saw him as Stu Redman, I'm like, I was on board. I had more sympathy for him as this douchebag because I liked him being Stu.
He did a fantastic, and honestly, I really like Gary Sinise. I think he's one of the like shining lights of the original miniseries. But yeah, no, he did a fantastic job as Stu Redman, and just in this 2020 version, and just like everyone else, Harold Lauder, that guy when he is he's got the picture of Tom Cruise on his mirror and like is practicing that smile. And then later on, when he's around people, you see him shoot that grin a couple times, and it's just like,
it's creepy.
That's brilliant. It is,
brilliantly creepy. Brilliantly creepy.
He was lanky and just, I don't know, just had that big jaw with like where he's hiding those teeth at, and just like really sold it. I don't know.
Because he did sort of seem like unassuming when like they show him at the beginning being bullied, and you understand the certain archetype of a character. But there was something about his face that by the end, and where he meets his end, is like screaming after Nadine is truly terrifying. Like sort of structure of his face and the way that his rage contorts it. There's quite a range in this guy. I'd also never seen Owen Teague. Yeah, and I mentioned in our other podcasts where I think based on the characterization in the book, I always imagined Harold to be kind of a Eugene from Walking Dead, and more of a kind of a doughy, nerdy guy, rather than a lanky one. And so by this point I'd let that go, because I'm trying to remember I can't remember who played him in the 94 one, but I was less thrown by like this person isn't like the person in the book this time around, and more accepting than I was for the 94 miniseries.
Because that's how he is in the book, right? Like he is kind of like chubby a little bit, and they talk about like life on the road after
all the
Captain
walking
trips. Like he really thins out and kind of starts to transform, and he did. Well, and that's part of also the storytelling. I mean, of course, we see flashbacks, but this movie starts out with Harold like digging holes for bodies. Like he's on
in
the
Boulder,
in Boulder, like
way after.
you're already like, that's it. When that book first came out, it was 800 pages, and then the uncut edition is like close to 1,200 pages, I think. So like, by the time they're in Boulder and he's on that crew, like 400 pages are gone out of that book, like that you've gone through. And this, that I think that's also part of like why they did that, is like we are going to be deviating from this a little bit. Like this is just because you're familiar with the story, it's not the same story, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a bold choice to just start out at that point. And you see Harold right in the first scene. Like that's what it, if I remember right, that's
I think it starts with them like a whole crew going into a place, and they're all like, and they've got all the gear on to protect themselves, and you see the decayed body, and that's how he got introduced to this post-pandemic world. And I think it's in this scene where Harold finds the clipping on a mirror of Tom Cruise from an Us or People Weekly or something like that, and he's like, I want to kind of be like that guy. And then but then we kind of go back. It's interesting because my experience of the Stephen King books, and even the way that his influence unfolded in like, sort of the prime of my movie going age and youth, prime being impressionable time, I would say, like of something like From Dusk Till Dawn, where half the movie introduced you to these characters and seems like one movie, and then it becomes a horror movie in the second half. I remember them kind of attributing that to a certain Stephen King influence of like his development of characters in everyday life before supernatural stuff hits them, so that when the supernatural hits them, you're invested in his character development so much that you accept it more, and it's more affecting. And one way I think it's
easier to suspend disbelief because you have emotional investment.
And in that case, in the mid 90s or whatever, that movie was different in the sense that it took the Stephen King formula of that half and half and applied it to a movie where you don't normally see it like that. This series took that Stephen King formula, it took that development and it applied it to a more modern filmmaking and television sensibility, where you didn't necessarily spend your time linearly with these people and then bad shit happens to them. It sort of jumbles the order to where the bad shit happens, and then you realize more in this new structure, like how it informed. I don't know. So it was interesting. So for fans of the book and who knew the story, I feel like it engaged us in a different way of like, oh, how are they going to treat this? And how are they going to, I feel like they really use this new medium to enhance the storytelling and leverage the strengths of it and all that's developed in the time in between to kind of keep us in there. I thought it was pretty cool. Palmer,
I agree.
Thank you. Was Harold a writer in the book? Was that an aspiration of his? I didn't remember that.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. I forgot.
That was because even in the book he keeps that whole manifesto. I think that's what that journal that he leaves behind when he dies in the 2020 version is like an homage. But remember, that's what they find to kind of convince themselves that Harold is a bad person, is when they in the book they do that whole subplot and she ends up finding that his manifesto and reads it, and but it's like on the eve when everything's happening, so it's too late obviously when she finds it, and they kind of tie
Francis
into that
is who finds it. Is it Francis?
Yeah, and they do that in the show. I couldn't remember if that was a thing.
2021 too. Like she finds like some of that stuff, but like him being a writer
and then gets trapped in his basement. Does that happen in the book too?
The way that he trapped her. Somewhat like that's how he knows that somebody was in there, is because the window is broken. Like she ends up breaking the window in the book, I think, and she either broke that window to get out or broke that window to get in, and that broken window is what lets him know, oh, somebody knows all this shit. And he goes right to the book and realizes it's disturbed, I think. Man, it's been a long time since I've been through The Stand.
Well, I think I couldn't. I felt like the writer thing was new, so it's kind of it's really. I'll just trust you that it was in the book. I would, because your memory about these things are better. But so I didn't know if that was a new addition, and the homage, like you mentioned the word homage. They had did you notice the nail? Do you remember that, the nail with the rejection letters, the Stephen King?
Yep.
Oh.
That's exactly what Stephen King did. Like he remembers sticking his first rejection on. There was a nail hanging on the wall, like sticking out of the wall, and so he just slammed that rejection letter on there. And he said by the time he graduated high school, like the nail was full of rejection letters before he got his first we want to publish this. And
wow,
that was a fun Easter egg for guys like us.
Yeah.
So, and I think the other cool thing about the Harold Lauder kind of casting, and why I think it's really effective in a different way maybe than it was with that sort of different, maybe the sort of heavyset versus wiry. There was something kind of, it resonated with like your Columbine shooter type thing. Like he's the kind of kid who like pushed too far would shoot up a school and ultimately did kind of destroy people because it couldn't be a part of them.
He blew up an old lady's house. Like he attempted to blow up an old lady. So
and so he was creepy, like that gave him aspects of that creepiness, because I totally agree with you. His like lanky, all limbs, long face, creepy.
Yeah. Kid pushed too far that took some pretty serious action. Yeah.
I know I had seen this guy in other stuff, and so when I brought up his filmography here, he is in the It movies.
Oh, really?
He is he's Eric Hostetter, who in the book is like that very disturbing, like sociopath in the book, like the one that like keeps the animals in the refrigerator. But in the movies, he's like that greaser kid that dies he's part of the gang that's looking for Ben. But it's the same guy. That's funny. So two Stephen King adaptations, and successful ones, I would argue.
Oh yeah.
So
that's cool.
What's so funny, I love actually seeing these people done up as actors and actresses, because they just look so different. As he looks like a very charming young man when you see him, like but he plays that character, that Harold Lauder character, like so fucking well. It's outrageous. It's like, that they are doing a good job if you don't like them. If you genuinely are like, I don't like seeing you, I don't like you at all when you're on the screen, like, they're a good character, like they're doing a good job. And he nailed it, man. I just made me uncomfortable. That fucking Tom Cruise shit, man, that was a nice addition. That it just shows like he's practicing being human, like it's he knows that he is not a part of these people, and awful.
Yeah, it totally resonates with me, like just to think about an actor that you didn't like because of something that they played in. Emily Blunt and Bradley Cooper were both actors that every time I would like see their names or their faces, I'd be like, oh, they're such horrible people, because they played characters that were mean and were really good at playing those characters.
Ben Affleck.
And like Ben Affleck's he's in that. That's another one. Like you are really good at playing an asshole.
The first like 3 movies I saw him in, he played a high school asshole, or like a and I'm just like, fuck that guy. I fucking can't stand him, because he played that character really well. To just tease a future conversation, because I know we don't have time for it now, but the guy that plays Homelander in The Boys is another like another character that he's so good at playing that character that you fucking can't stand him. If I saw him just as himself outside of that show, I'd be like, fuck that guy. It's because of how good he plays that character and just does it and sells it so well.
Yeah.
I can honestly say, like, the people. I know I've already said it, but the cast of this, like, 2020 telling of The Stand is just so. We haven't even gotten to
Yeah.
the good ones, but like
Yeah.
even Amber Turd is like
Yeah.
good as
Yeah.
as Nadine Cross, you know. So
And on the first, I don't know if you remember this, but the first episode she was in, you were like, "Of fucking course she's playing this character. Of course she's
Yeah.
Nadine. Like, of
Yeah.
course." And I was like, "I don't know what that means." He's like, "You don't need to know what it means right now, but you'll get it. Like,
Yeah.
we'll get there." And you were totally right.
yeah, for anybody following the Johnny Depp slander like drama that all happened, depending on which side of the story you want to follow on. But my favorite part of all of it is there's some story that came out that she apparently, in a fit of rage, pooped in the bed, and after that incident, Johnny Depp only referred to her as Amber Turd, and I thought that was whether true or not, that is just pure genius to me. So I cannot refer to her to anything other than Amber Turd.
Well, I just picture him too with his like, he is a guy whose career I followed like from, I think in 1990, at least our episode 90. So I think about things that came out, and actually even the version of The Stand that ultimately was Stephen King's final published one was published in 1990. But the Johnny Depp of like 1990, he was so cool for so long, and he was in such like bizarre little movies, and then eventually he became, such a mainstream like Disney property with the Pirates movies and stuff. But nowadays, he just has not aged super well in the last like 10 years. So I picture him a certain way that's just kind of sad, So, I guess that's like so shitty of me to say in a way, but like, anyway, even so, like picturing that Johnny Depp, like calling her Amber Turd adds just a level of kind of greatness or sort of delight to the whole thing, where he's just like,
dressed
like Keith Richards, like and Pepe Le Pew, just being like, I don't know, whatever, Amber Turd is just,
yeah. To just call this like, like at one point in time, It Woman of Hollywood, that he's dating like Amber Turd. Like it's so juvenile and just like so 13-year-old boy. And so that's what makes it so much better. Like,
he's talking about her like pooping in his bed. It's just like,
yeah,
it's so wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, if you know this is going to happen, you just keep your mouth shut. But like, as more that's come out about it, it's all been negative about her being a horrible human. So like, if you didn't want all this stuff to come out about you being a horrible human, just shut your mouth and go away. Instead, you're making a stink.
Don't shit in people's beds. That's what you should.
I mean, certainly don't do that.
Can we start there? Can we start there?
Yes, we definitely
should. How about if you
should.
don't want people to think you're a horrible person, don't shit in other people's beds.
But don't be surprised that everybody's going to find out that you're a horrible person after you shit in someone's fucking bed. Of course they're going to find out you're a horrible person. Look what you just did. Come on.
Anyways.
Good casting.
I'm with
you. Agreed. She did a fantastic job.
She was cast well. She was cast
Nadine
well.
Cross for sure.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because they get that that dynamic of the back and forth of not necessarily having things unfold linearly, but you do get a little bit of the kind of focusing on a character individually before bringing them into the group. You get some of that as well. It's just kind of spread out a little bit. And so we that first episode we're introduced to like two of these kind of sets of people, and in the second one we're introduced to Larry Underwood and Lloyd Henry, and then we also see Randall Flagg. And so the plot synopsis for Pocket Savior, the second episode, is musician Larry Underwood is on the cusp of his big break when Captain Trips strikes New York. Wandering alone, he meets an alluring new acquaintance, also desperate to escape, and incarcerated Lloyd Henry comes face to face with Randall Flagg. So we're get introduced more of that cast. How did you feel about the Larry Underwood casting?
All fantastic. I
guess we've said everybody is good, right?
And it helps avoid some of the like casual racism from the book and from the 90s, because like one of the criticisms his mom has is like, you sounded black. so they just made him black.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So it like it kind of dodged some of that a little bit, and he did a good job of. I feel like Larry Underwood is the one where he gets like more play in that like falling of the world, like in the pre-part of the story, like in the book. Larry Underwood gets a large portion of that, and he kind of his importance, not to be minimized, but kind of like tapers off as the book goes on, and so I feel like his character got a little gutted, just in that sense that you only see the worst parts of him pre Captain Trips, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah. There's that whole thing about his mother calling him a taker and all that stuff.
Yep. And I think that his exposition that you get in the 90s and in the book itself, like you see that it's just he, in its sense, is a result of this like life of work that he finally is at a point that he feels like he deserves all of these things, like and when you just see him do that one performance and not do it very well, and like his mom has that confrontation with his mom, like it definitely paints his character as much worse than I feel like you don't get that internal monologue of that that you get in the book, right? Where the benefit of that, where you can hear his intentions explicitly. So that makes it a little more challenging. But then it's like, as soon as it happens, he kind of owns up to trying to get through this as best as possible pretty quickly. And Heather Graham's character is pretty good.
Yeah.
And that is more true. Like that.
Like Ash's face. She's like,
very well, they picked like unique parts of the book to stay faithful to, because like that character doesn't, it only shows motivation for Larry Underwood's character later on, when he's like, I was with in the book and in this miniseries, he cites back to the death of that woman as like, I thought everything was fine and just assumed everything was fine because things were finally getting comfortable. And the second I started to do that, she killed herself, and I don't know what. And he was coming to grips with that. And
yeah, that's really
the '90s miniseries they eliminated that character completely
altogether.
So for that's where I'm, and it was just good to see Heather Graham again.
Yeah,
I do agree that Heather Graham's character told us more about Larry Underwood than anything. But what I was thinking about the Larry Underwood character was for so many people in a world with Captain Trips, everything was awesome and got shitty after Captain Trips came. And for Larry Underwood, he thought things were awesome because he had wealth and fame, but he was not a happy, positive, good individual. He was not a good human. And Captain Trips happens, and we get to literally watch him from this famous person, Larry Underwood, to on his knees in the pool as the water is rising, and he's holding Ray's hand. I think her name is Ray.
Oh, yeah. Oh, shit.
He's saying the prayer. He's saying the prayer to her, and they're like, "What? I forget what it is that they're saying, but they're, I will walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil." And he's holding on to her hands, and they're like, it's showing his humanity. Like from one end of the spectrum, like you get to watch him evolve as a character and as a human being, and go from this like I'm selfish and living for myself to I shall walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil. And believing in something bigger than himself.
Yeah, the example of his courage in that moment helps bring down Randall Flagg's whole shit. That's such a great observation and a great, I'm sure, what they must have intended. They use it's interesting because I've not explored any internet buzz about this, but so I know there's a lot of criticism that this about how this may or may not be faithful to the book, and I'm very fascinated by that. I mean, I'm a dude that adapted a book of sorts and spent a lot of time in the whole blah blah blah. So I've got a lot of interest in that sort of thing. But to me, this series feels super faithful to the book. It's all of the things that I remember. So I actually forgot. And so it's that's kind of interesting too. So it's like partially I remember them because this is what is included. So this is reminding me of the book. And so the things not included, I'm not reminded of. But also having the experience of going back through our previous podcast conversations of before this was a thing, before this was even an announced project, in like 2017. Palmer, you suggest like this would be a great TV series to spend the necessary time on it. All of the things we're talking about and all of the things that stuck with me as we actually had even less time than this to talk about the Book of the Stand were the same things. I didn't talk about or remember any of the government stuff. In fact, I mentioned pretty openly how much I felt I forgot about all of the many things that happened in this book. But the things that I remember and mentioned in that podcast that stuck with me are the kind of interpersonal payoff type things that I didn't articulate as well as you did, Ash, about like some of the character arcs. But those are the things that they retain for the series. And maybe for that reason, the series feels super faithful to me and feels so much like the book that's why I was also reticent to like revisit the Stand miniseries from the 90s, as I was like, I really liked this new adaptation and want it to stay alive in my memory. And
that might be why I liked this one so much, is because it pulled at my heartstrings, because it made those characters feel so much more authentic to me, and their trials and tribulations were real, and I could empathize and
and effectively developed.
Yeah.
A little
really
Easter
liked
eggy thing about Larry Underwood. So the initial epigraph, one of the epigraphs for the Stand book, is a verse from Bruce Springsteen's song Jungle Land. Even the title comes from it. To make their stand and all this. And in some of we talked about in the previous episodes and stuff, Stephen King, who is a Springsteen fan, was like talking about, some folks would speculate that maybe Springsteen would be a good Larry Underwood, and he's like, yeah, based on some of his music video work, I could definitely see that. So I forgot about some of that, and one of my notes when watching it this time is like, when we first see Larry Underwood with his leather jacket and his hat, he's very much dressed up in this show like Springsteen's look from the Jungle End period, from the Born to Run. Like if you look at pictures from Spring, he doesn't have the ball on top of his hat, but otherwise it's perfect. The beard, the jacket, the whole deal. So it's a fun little, again, like little Easter egg.
Awesome.
But yeah, I really liked him. I really rooted for him. I've always liked Heather Graham for cosmetic reasons or whatever, but it was nice to see her as that kind of as that character. And to me too, she see like what Fran Goldsmith seems a little bit to me like a kind of, she looked a little like Heather Graham to me. And I don't know if that was at all intentional, because they don't really, those things don't cross over a lot. But so the Lloyd character, we see this kind of low level criminal who's very easily led by someone like Polk, the guy there robbing a convenience store, and it lands Lloyd in prison. But you also see in that dynamic how Lloyd can be susceptible to a kind of a strong authoritative person saying like, you're worthy of my attention, Lloyd, etc. And the most authoritarian big bad of the whole series, Randall Flagg, comes and rescues him in jail after Captain Trips at the end of this episode. Palmer, how did you feel about Alexander Skarsgård as Randall Flagg in this characterization?
So I was fully on board for it while we were going through the show. I thought it was pretty well done. But I told Ash last night when we were watching, or 2 nights ago when we were working on the 90s version of The Stand, I really like that version of Randall Flagg a lot.
Oh, me too.
I think it is much more effective as Randall Flagg. That guy just in the 90s. I got to look him up.
Yeah, you look him up. I'll just remind again. So I'd encourage folks who are Stan fans, if they're listening to this, check out episodes 12 and 15 of our podcast. And I'll try not to repeat too much of that. But I did say in those episodes that, and I don't know that guy's name either. And I never
Jamie
saw this.
Sheridan is
that's how I pictured him. As closely and as sort of amorphously as I pictured Randall Flagg reading the book, that guy seemed like what I imagined. And so it's really cool for me to hear like that you're like, all's great with the Skarsgard, and Skarsgard for me was different. So essentially I feel the same way. I liked that other 90s one. What did, I guess, work about it for this, or what I think is interesting or effective, is that if you're thinking of this as like a charismatic, I'm not sure how charismatic that guy was, to where he was a great sort of manifestation of that like dark man kind of evil thing with
spirit.
The big mullet.
Yeah.
He was evil from the first frame. Like his first time you see him, he's evil.
Yes.
And Skarsgård like really played this character low key, and until that evil came through. Like there were like 3 or 4 big scenes where he just couldn't contain himself, and that it made, because he played the rest of the characters so subdued, like just soft-spoken and quiet and logical and no sense of malice or mental instability on the background, so that when those moments that he did let that out, it made it even more intense in contrasting to who he was before. That guy in the 90s, man, he played that intimidating 100% the entire time. You knew you weren't dealing with it. And that's when he's recruiting and going around, like he recruits that. The scene, I also like Lloyd better from the 90s too than I do in the,
was that, who was that? Was that Miguel Ferreira or
I don't know his name.
Yeah. I think that's it.
While you're looking that up, what I thought was really effective about Skarsgård, even so, I didn't prefer it, but it made sense that like you as a Lloyd, as a whatever, would follow him because he's appealing, like he's gorgeous and he's not threatening, and he's really like kind of lulls you in with his charisma. Whereas the other guy, you see him and you're like, oh. If you have a spidey sense, it should just go off like crazy. Don't go with this guy. So
it is Miguel Ferreira. First off, plays Lloyd in the 90s, and that. So what's funny is the both of these scenes are definitely, we went through the 90s. As far as we got through the 90s, we got through this scene too, and so I'm just contrasting both of them in my brain. And there is a definite moment when the 90s Lloyd pauses and like knows he's selling his soul. Like, so he's got his stone because that's the key, right? And like, and in the book he gives all of them that stone that has his mark on it. And Miguel Ferreira asks him, he's like, "Is that mine?" He's like, "Yep." And all you got to do is take it. And that's the like Faustian bargain that he's making, right? And like he's like, oh, man, you can see the pause. I like both of those characters better in the 90s version, and the Lloyd from the 90s, just because he is, so they play the character pretty similar on what gets them into jail, right? But after he makes that deal with Flagg, Miguel Ferreira plays himself as like a straight man. Like he's got a suit on, he's very suave. Like I feel like he's like, I have the power now to be who I really want to be, and I'm gonna be this like sophisticated criminal, and the one from the 20s, it was a caricature of that. Maybe again, like it's proof that the acting was so good that I was just annoyed with it. It was like, you're just an obnoxious kid, like that just And again, he's playing that character very well. I don't know. It's hard because what ultimately the 2020 version of Vegas and what happens there is very, I think, effective. Like having the Coliseum style fights in the, every day, and all these pictures of Flagg on video screens essentially saying I'm watching you, and like that's the eye of Flagg, right? Like where in the book it was like it was an actual eye was his symbol,
so I didn't remember that.
But which it's really the sign for the Crimson King who Flagg works for. For the Dark Tower.
Well, Dark Tower.
So long story short, I like the 90s version of Flagg. I think that guy did a much better, effective. I shouldn't say better. It was a much more effective interpretation of the character. With all due respect to Skarsgard, like I think he did that character very well. But it reminded me a lot of, if you've ever seen any of the show True Blood.
I never did see that. He's in that though, right?
No.
Yeah, he plays like the one of the main characters ultimately, who is a vampire that's been around forever, and he plays that character very similar. So maybe that was part of the reason also why I was having trouble suspending disbelief, is just because I felt like I think that character's name is Eric, and I just he was that character being Randall Flagg, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I could see what they were going for, but like you, I kind of preferred that other thing. I'm not sure what I would have rather they did, or what would be as effective as some of these other characters were updated, but it seemed odd and anachronistic, his whole kind of Canadian tuxedo and the tall pompadour. It was nice to have that little smiley pin, from the 70s or whatever, but it was also a little weird, I guess. It didn't quite always work. Ash, are you making notes? I wrote
a couple things down because I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. So I saw and this is more in retrospect now, thinking back on the original, and this is how I know that my awareness and appreciation for good movies and TV has expanded, because I'm like, oh man, I would go back and watch this just to see if like what I'm confirming or what I'm thinking is actually what's happening in the show. But so it's obviously a story that has sucked me in. Introducing the characters is telling us if they're leaders or followers. So when we meet a character, we very quickly are able to form and decide if they're going to be leaders in this new world or if they're going to be followers. And this is not absolutely true with everybody, but the leaders are going to go towards Boulder and be with Mother A, and the followers are probably going to want to line up with Randall Flagg because he's got protection and is offering them things that are more useful to them in the time. Like Lloyd, he gets Lloyd when he's at a very vulnerable position. He's hungry, he's trapped in this prison, and Randall Flagg's offering him an out and giving him the chance to trade with, and for him where he's sitting, maybe it's more valuable to trade than to keep what he has and take the risk of not getting what Randall Flagg has to offer. I think Randall Flagg is super creepy and manipulative, and I really liked his character in this one better than the last guy, and I think that's just because of the connection that I had to the new miniseries, like to the CBS version, and I like it. Yeah. But I said we first know the very depths, or begin to understand the depths of his manipulation capabilities and how skilled he is at saying something to someone, or actually like with his powers manipulating them into believing that he is right, or telling them the true thing. So we very quickly know that about him, but we also really quickly are learning how fragile his ego is and how insecure he is, because you see when I think it happens before this, but I just remember him being in Vegas and elevating above the crowd or whatever. And I think you brought this up, babe, like that he starts to lower, or he starts to shake or something, because the crowd is like, what happens? Do you remember? Do you remember what I'm talking about? It might be towards the end, but there's a couple different times.
It's the scene in the pool with Larry, I think, right? Where they're
maybe
like
he's not able to. His powers are all based on their fear of him, and
right.
And as that starts to wane and slip, and they realize that he's not that maybe this powerful thing that we are giving him credit for, he literally stops becoming that powerful. So, in that also too is like just knowing that Randall Flagg, he is a recurring baddie that kind of lives in Stephen King's universe that just makes his way in and out of various books. And maybe I'm misinterpreting the character, but his ego is just not that fragile. It's like
I see.
No,
okay. I would say in the series they really play to that. But that's interesting to know in the bigger scheme.
Well, because then I think about the very, very end when he goes to that island of people who have never heard of him and don't know who he is.
Yeah.
Why does he do that?
He demands they worship him.
In my mind, he does that because he needs to feel powerful and important, and the world that he just got destroyed in is not going to work for what he needs it to. And so he's going to come to these people who have never heard of him because immediately he blows up a couple heads and now he is their worship me, and he elevates above them.
He literally shouts, "Worship me."
So that's where I get the his ego is fragile, and that's where I get that.
I agree that this show his ego is fragile. Knowing Randall Flagg as a character in the larger Stephen King universe, it is difficult if you know that to know.
Yeah.
Because any other time he could give two shits what people think about him. He has his own ulterior motives that he is and his
source of power doesn't come from that.
And that's really all that matters. And so to have seen it been so basal like that like I just need people to worship me, and that's like and if they start to poke holes in my stuff, I'm gonna overreact and be a baby about it. He does that in this book. In the book, like when Nadine kills herself, he really has an emotional breakdown at all levels. And that does kind of chip away at this exterior shell that he has built, because maybe he did actually have some feelings for her, even though, but it really his, the idea of having that kid that was in her stomach that was more appealing to him. So
yeah,
that would be my only complaint. And he's just so pretty. I like the mullet wearing, like the Canadian tuxedo and buttons and all that shit works so much better on that, like the 90s version of Randall.
Not if you're looking for somebody to manipulate your audience. I think Skarsgard is just pretty enough to to listen to, because he's so easy to look at. He draws you in. He's good at the manipulation. Yeah, I get why. I mean, I get the 90s version of this character. I understand that for that version of the miniseries. I think for this one, it works though.
Yeah, I love what you said about the shows you whether they're leaders or followers, and the dichotomy, because that ultimately people do follow Mother A as well. But it's that thing about with Flagg in the Dark Man, he obfuscates things, he feeds off of fear, and he finds people to exploit people's weakness to his own ends. Whereas Mother Abigail sort of, it's that whole idea of she's the light, and she sort of guides, she sort of more inspires people, and rather than intimidates them. And brings out
following
sort of
Mother A doesn't mean you're a follower. Following Mother A means you're going to stand and be true.
Yeah, which is
where following Randall Flagg, like I don't see. I mean, yes, you're following Mother A, but you're still saying that I want to be a leader. I want to be contributing. I want to be helping. I want to do something to make this new world a better place. Whereas I see people who are following Randall Flagg as like they're following. They're sheep. They're blind. They just want to do what is in the best interest of the goose. That'll be good for them as the gander.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. That really does seem how they build it. Yeah. And well, to keep charging ahead, I really like that what you were saying about that. In the next episode. Oh, 3 blank. So Mother Abigail selects a surprising voice to be her conduit to her chosen committee in Boulder. Nick Andros, and the arrival of a disturbing visitor to the Boulder Free Zone shakes the resident to their core. I'm not sure who that is, but Nadine Cross is haunted by a childhood memory. These are just, we don't need to talk about these, but I just want to throw them out there as kind of fun things from the episode we just moved past. I love when in the sewer that they're actually the update of them Larry Underwood using the GPS to help navigate them in the sewers was a fun update. And the little reference, he's like, just pretend we're Ninja Turtles, was fun. And I think there's a big chunk of that where he just says fuck. That's the only dialogue. He's just like, fuck. Anyway. And the little Easter egg I feel is an Easter egg when we're introduced to Heather Graham. That they play that song like, I got a new pair of roller skates, blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's Roller Girl.
Roller Girl, yeah.
But, okay, so Nick Andros. I like this Nick Andros. In fact, I don't know. I think he was Rob Lowe in the 94 miniseries. I don't remember how I might have pictured him in the book, but this guy definitely. Oh, and the whole thing where I have this note. So he's like, we see him. He's a deaf guy who doesn't know he offended someone in a bar, and then the guy just like literally beats him so bad that he goes blind in one eye. That stuff is so hard to take. I remember the Pride was, there's so much of that in Stephen King books. Like we see it with Harold too, where it's like he's just bullied terribly and beaten up in that first episode. And then Pride was like, man, I really wish Stephen King didn't do this kind of thing so often. It's tough to take, but it definitely like,
I totally agree.
Engenders some sympathies. But then I have this note that when Nick Andros comes back, he encounters like that same asshole who kicked out his eye. And he cares for him somehow. I can't remember the specifics, but that's
they're
just
in the hospital together. Like when he comes to in the hospital, that guy is dying from the flu.
Captain Trips, yeah. And it does. So, it sets up like this is who this guy is. This guy blinded him brutally, and the kind of person Nick Andros is, and we see as a character, is that he'll care for this guy as opposed to being vengeful toward him. And of course, we meet. I don't even know if I could say it because this guy breaks me up throughout this whole episode, the whole series.
Moon.
Oh, this Tom Cullen, man. Brad William Henke is just, I can't even fucking take it. Like, he's the heart of the show. I think that I saw the actor say it. And this, like, maybe the best thing for me about this whole, like, version of it was this version of Tom Cullen.
Yep, I agree.
So beautiful.
It is one of those. I would just grin ear to ear anytime he would be on the screen, even when he's like in New Vegas, just like lazily like hauling dead bodies, and just like you're still just like, oh, Tom Cullen, get out of there! What are you doing there?
Palmer, you introduced me to the Tom Cullen like characterization this time. You kind of did the rap that he does. Would you grace us with that? I love it so much.
I don't even know if I can remember all of it.
Because he encounters Nick Andros somehow. So Nick Andros is kind of, he's blind he's deaf and then he's almost blind. So he's got these kind of impairments, so quote unquote. And then he encounters Tom Cullen. What, in the hospital maybe? Yeah, and Tom Cullen.
Yeah, like Tom Cullen just like wanders into the hospital one day.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hi, my name is Tom Cullen. I am mentally challenged. Yeah, I am. He just goes through this whole long litany list, and the gag is like, Nick trying to communicate, I can't speak or hear, and Tom Cullen trying to communicate that he's mentally challenged and might have some trouble communicating with you. It's just it works. It's a great little gag, endearing. And it is very endearing. And he's so beautiful. He just, his beauty and his ability to just see the happiness in this world that he's stuck in is awesome. And when he finally sees Mother Abigail, like that whole scene is fantastic. I think when they like go into Hemingford Home, which is an old person's retirement home in this version, and not a town in Nebraska, he goes into his speech. He's like, "Hi, I'm Tom Cullen," and she cuts him off. She's like, "I know, honey, it's so good," or something like that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's so good to see you, or something. Like, it's so beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might have to cut to I'll find the thing in the previous episode where you really like slay me with it.
The guy they got to play their interpretation of Tom Cullen is fucking amazing. Moon guy.
Oh,
like the,
yes. Yeah. Oh, fun. That's exciting.
Absolutely stellar. And he's just like, he's got this monologue that he has memorized, and he just like breaks into it. That's just what he's like. Hello, my name is Tom Cullen. Please do not be afraid. I am large, but I am very kind. And he like goes through this whole long thing, and like it's so awesome.
That sounds
And like
great.
he gets frustrated because like people like he meets Nick Andros, right?
Mhm.
Who's deaf, and he tries to he says, "I cannot read, but I work hard." And so he starts writing, and he's like, "Didn't I say that I couldn't read?" It is so hard to remember all that stuff. Let me just start over. Hello, my name is Tom Cullen, and it is fucking.
Part of the fun gag of it is that he has to say it from the beginning or he won't remember it all.
Yeah.
and then so part of it is like maybe he doesn't know how to read very well or something like that. And Nick Andrews is communicating through writing stuff down. And he just goes, he's like, but I just told you, okay, I am Tom Cullen. Do not be afraid. I am large, but I am. It's just. But he look after.
Endearing.
Yeah, he looks after. They're a great pair. They kind of fill in each other's gaps, and they're an important part of the people who start to assemble around Mother Abigail. And of course, Nick ultimately becomes kind of her kind of her main guy, right? Like, sort of like her version of who we were just talking about with Lloyd. Like, so if Randall Flagg has Lloyd, Mother Abigail has Nick Andrews.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the thing that I read about a comparison of this to the miniseries was the Rob Lowe had a notepad that he would communicate through, and this Nick Andrews had Fran as his interpreter with the sign language.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That was cool.
That was a difference that made a big impact and gave Nick Andros much more of a voice than he would have had if all we had was the paper and pen.
Yeah. And a better kind of for a deeper than relationship with Fran, and it adds a dimension to her character. And I love too how I'm remembering that now, to where when they are ultimately all gathered in Boulder and part of that kind of council, it was a nice kind of like inclusive thing, a representation type thing as well. That was very sort of 2020 to where it wasn't heavy handed either, but it was like she would, rather than say like, this is important to do, like make sure you include Nick by, it was all action oriented. And so she would sign if she knew his back was to people and couldn't read their lips and stuff. And the way that was integrated in a mix, I thought was really cool. Nick Andrews too was like a big emotional engine for me. Let's see. Oh, and we're introduced to Greg Kinnear in that episode. I really enjoyed that casting.
I would put this with the guy that played my favorite Martian and Spicoli's nemesis in Fast Time at
Mr.
Ridgemont
Hand,
High. Mr. Hand was you dick. I cannot work with that young man. That's how he responded to that ad lib. Like he went to the director and said, I cannot work with that young man. Really? He is not a professional. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Because it wasn't in the script. That was an ad lib. Like,
I love it. Yeah, I remember hearing about that, how Sean Penn was Spicoli, like in a method way, to where like at the rap party he came and introduced them to everybody. Hi, I'm Sean. Because prior to
and like they called when they said when they called to tell him he got the part, he was Spicoli on his
Already?
answering machine. Like he had already, like, that's how much he had sold himself, like as method for this character. So that's a nice little side there.
That's beautiful.
No, Greg Kinnear just knocked it out of the park as again, just fantastic casting.
I like him a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I got my Glenn Bateman going today with the sweater and stuff because I saw
Yeah.
this is how I was dressed to sleep, and then I was watching the recaps and I was just like, I have a weird thing. I don't know if I said it on this show, but like I will often joke to the bride as I just want to see myself older, like dressed like Kevin Costner's dad in The Bodyguard when they go to that cabin, which even I don't have a clear picture of in my mind anymore. But it basically is also dressing like Glenn Bateman in this version of the TV show.
Oh,
that
that's
really
awesome.
played to some things I like to see. Maybe I don't know. I don't think I can do those scarves. That's taking it a little too far for me. But
yeah, I mean, he did a great job of, that character is supposed to be the voice of, do we need to get back to what we were,
the way
before?
things were, right? Do we really need to
Yeah.
rebuild like they're moving towards in Colorado?
And I think that's an important voice for this story. Is like we're losing are we losing sight of what we're doing here if all we're trying to do is get back to the way things were before? We have such an opportunity to make things different right now, and how many of those opportunities do we get to do that? So and Greg Kinnear just really hit it out of the park on those aspects of that character. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I see
I liked him a
where
lot.
or like we're kind of I'm letting us fall prey to maybe take too long on certain things, and so I'm gonna interject and maybe move away from the episode by episode to give the bride's take on all this. At the end of it, which I think she mostly liked it, but she wasn't as into it as maybe I was or would have liked her to be. So I'll first start off saying I think she generally enjoyed it, but my note here was she was probably trying to bite her tongue. I think she tried when I was like, "What'd you think of it?" I think she tried to bite her tongue 3 times before responding because I'm probably tearful when I'm asking her what do you think? She's like, "It was a lot of book for not a lot of plot." She goes. So this is basically just to say for everyone, here's what the general story is. So now that we can maybe just talk about some things that resonated for us. She goes, we found the guy. We all went west. We killed the guy. It's basically Lord of the Rings, but with the devil. That's what happens. They all got good and evil. People make these big journeys, and then there's a big stand of good against evil. And for our purposes and those who've never seen the show or just basically trying to loosely follow along, you got Mother Abigail and the folks in Boulder as the kind of trying to maybe rebuild society, and then you got on the other side or not on the other side, but further west in Las Vegas. I think that's right directionally. You got Randall Flagg basically creating this society of just hedonism and people that are gravitating towards him and wanting to just kind of do whatever they want. And he encourages that, except for he does sort of maintain a sort of absolute fealty to whatever it is. If he asks something, you better fucking follow orders. You're going to be killed. Yeah. And then there's this general sense of the people with Mother Abigail feeling like they need to kind of confront all this out there. And then even so people are sent kind of as spies, and that's the general stand referred to in the book. And so I think rather than maybe move beat by beat so that we're not here all weekend, we'll just give that as the backdrop for everything else that happens. Though, of course, I invite you guys to elaborate, but I know that it was me holding us to episode to episode.
To the bride's point, I mean, the stand was King's ambition when he wrote it, was to write an American version of Lord of the Rings. So,
yeah, we talk about that in our other episodes. So I thought it was cool.
So,
yeah, there was a YouTube video we watched about it. Yep, earlier.
Oh,
today.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Send it to you.
Oh yeah, we could put it in the videos mentioned on the show, and I would watch it at this point. And so in episode 4 too, not to get too episode by episode, I have notes for episodes that are like, for me, they're barely notes, but that's where the Stephen King cameo is in the Hemingford home.
The picture,
poster.
Yeah.
The poster of the old folks' home. Yeah.
He's one of the people at the table for the advertisement of the old folks' home, which I find absolutely hysterical.
Very funny.
Yeah, because he's not the young man he was in the mid 70s when he wrote this.
No, absolutely not. So, I thought like the Hemingford home thing is a good example of like they decided to bring Heather Graham's character back from the book and spend like a good half of that episode, and it's at the same time it's like, but you cut out Hemingford home being this like place that even Mother Abigail needed to take. So Hemingford home is in Colorado. It's a nursing home in Colorado. So she doesn't have to make a pilgrimage, and that was part of the reason one of the reasons I felt that like Hemingford home, she needed to bring everybody to her first because she needed assistance in that pilgrimage as well, like to get to Boulder, and that helped get them in a good position which I find it ironic that they refer to the man in the West is how they refer to what's going on in Las Vegas, and they're in Colorado, and I picture that as being very West too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I got a little confused when I said it aloud, but I was like, is that just my general disregard for directions? But so I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. So, but that was one of those things where I'm like, it just is really interesting the choices that you made. That like Heather Graham's character is a great example. That like the 90s sitcom introduced, they cut out cut that character out and put Nadine Cross in his place, and instead of her committing suicide, she just leaves one morning because Randall Flagg commands it. Yeah, and so I just thought it was interesting that they like made that like they decided to cut all of Hemingford home down to just being a nursing home, but still brought Heather Graham's character from the book back into the show and devote like the time they did with that character. So just interesting choices like that I think that if you're the only nice thing of knowing the book is like you're going to get some of the backstory that they cut out, but there are going to be some significant deviations from the book, I think, with this 2021. It is a retelling of the same story, to be fair.
Yeah. What are some of those that jump out for you? Because like I said, for me, it's like the things I think that I remember about it seemed really faithfully translated with this like one exception of that well thing. But it sounds like you have a better sort of sense of like here's the similarities, and so while we're on that topic, what are some other stuff?
So not to discount the well, that's a big one. That last episode is pretty good.
And all new, right? That's like nowhere.
Yeah,
written by Stephen King.
Yep, and that's really the portion of that's new. So like the Randall Flagg thing of him finding the natives, that's in the book.
That's how the updated thing ends. Exactly. Yeah, the 1990
he wakes
update.
up after the bomb. He basically has no gap in his memory from the bomb going off to waking up on this beach. That's where those natives are. And so, and he just wakes up and is like, well, I just have to try again. And that's why he like goes off to these people. Like he's just anticipating, like just trying again, like where he's always going to be this, the implication is you can't kill evil. It's always going to be in this world and always going to have to be something you have to deal with. And, but the whole addition of like the new Mother Abigail in that episode and Franny falling down the well and Franny interacting with Randall Flagg, all of that is new and really, I think plays well. I think I think that is all good stuff. One of the videos we watched really complained about where they were like, so Stu and Franny and their new baby are going to risk everything, their 3-month-old baby, to recross the country in this like post-apocalyptic world. And they do that in the book too. That's how the book, like
Yeah.
Franny gets wants to get back to the ocean, and so they decide to leave Boulder. Like they've served their purpose for Boulder. They have made it safe for the free zone to come back up. So they feel they would stifle progress because they would continually come back to them to make decisions. And if there was going to be progress made and let new leadership make decisions, they had to get out of the situation. It's really actually, the book does a great job of making that move back to Maine or Algonquin, wherever that is, wherever she was from.
Maine. Maine. You're right.
Makes it so much more noble what they decide to do. And so that's a big change. I really just think it's more, not all of them are bad changes. So there's like the trucker who has the women chained up, and he confront like Harold Lauder is like, he does a great job of showing how weak Harold actually is, even with these like misguided notions he has of himself in this world. Like it just shows like, no, you're still just a wuss. Like this guy's gonna,
when confronted with this kind of violent guy who's holding these women sort of like, I don't know, like sexually abusing them. And one of them we
hostage.
Get to the Dana, what is her name, Dana Jurgens or something, comes to be a part of the larger group. I really liked how they dealt with that character and the trial. Like,
and she's one of the people that that gets sent to Vegas, like on behalf of Mother A.
Yeah, I loved that. So like the Dana was one of the women held captive by this guy that as Harold and Franny cross the country, and they're like leaving notes for Stu, and eventually, they're leaving notes for anyone who else is alive, and then ultimately Stu Redman is following those and hooks up, and then
Larry Underwood too.
Yeah, that's how they all kind of come together and started moving towards Mother Abigail. But it's like for a while Harold gets Franny to himself, and kind of the relationship he's hoping is burgeoning that he's always wanted. But then when Stu Redman enters the picture, and it's kind of cool too that James Marsden is like a little Tom Cruise-esque. He's like this really handsome guy, and it's like what Harold would like to be and what he sees that. So he's very threatened by Franny's attraction to Stu. Yeah. And
instantly.
Like it comes out. He's like, you're going with him and his fucking dimples and all this. And it's like, Franny starts to see too, the sort of darkness and possessiveness in Harold. And, but anyway,
it's foreshadowing of what is to come.
Yeah.
Like it starts the bitterness and the resentment that just builds over the next however much time is between that day and the day that.
The slap in the face for that character is even when he's the last man on Earth, she still isn't going to choose him.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Is that put so succinctly in the show, or that's you
I don't think so. But
yeah,
I mean, that's
it.
That's where the resentment. That's what the resentment is. Like he sees. That's why he even is so chipper. Like when he's going to visit her after everybody's dying off, is like she has no choice now but to like me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am literally the last man on Earth that she knows. So I'm like, this is it. And even in that position, she still doesn't choose him. It's just gonna get it.
It makes you feel bad for him until you don't.
Right.
Until you don't.
Yeah. And he was feeling kind of full of himself there for a while until they ran into this horrible trucker that's like physically imposing, because Harold's so smart, but he's not really very physically capable, and that's part of why he resents Stu as well, I think. And anyway, so we get that glimpse with that trucker, but you were saying there's a deviation there as well.
I don't think that interaction even happens. Like I don't think that even happens.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember something about women being in this, because
but I don't think Harold is in that altercation, and I don't think it's like that Stu saves them. I agree with you. I think that might be part of like Dana's backstory in the book, like where like
so Dana is a part of that's what I couldn't. Those are things
Dana
that are kind of
was one
sketchy.
the ones in
to where it's like I remember that dynamic, but I would have mistaken it for having been this way in the book. Okay.
There's just little choices like that I feel like are a little different, and I don't know. I'm sure there were plenty of videos when we were doing our research to try to refresh our memory on this that were very just like they want to, of course, like focus on all of those differences and be negative about them. And I want to reiterate, as a whole, I really think this thing works as its own thing. Like if you can nitpick it all day long, and it's really hard to compete with 1,200 pages of source material. Where King spends all of that time getting you emotionally invested in every one of these characters, and like, I mean, Lloyd Henry is a great example where there's a whole section when Lloyd is dying in the prison of starvation where he remembers back where he's 7 and got rabbits, and like he goes into this whole thing about his relationship with his dad and like how that tied in, and it all boils down that he let these rabbits in the July heat starve to death, like back like he took care of them for like 2 weeks because they were like, the novelty was fresh, but as soon as that novelty wore off, when he remembered the rabbits, he could not remember the last time he had seen the rabbits. And by the time he went back there, like back behind the garage where the cage was, like they were like maggot infested and dead of starvation. Right. And you can't compete with that level of exposition that you get with 1,200 pages of source material. So I think it's kind of a low-hanging fruit to kind of hang your hat. There's 2 euphemisms all combined together into one for those of you keeping track on the fact that I'm going to make all these videos just pointing out all the differences between the show and the book. It's told 40 decades, like 4 decades later, or than when the book came out, because it was the mid 70s when the book came out, and then it's told 20 years later after the first adaptation of the miniseries came out. Like it has to be its own thing. And just even the level of storytelling, like I would say, like I would call the first like 4 episodes very Tarantino, because it is just it just jumps around in the timeline. That style of storytelling has been around forever, of course, but like it really got as a like visual medium for television and movies, like only within the last like 20 years, like in post the first miniseries, right? So
right.
I think it's important to just stress that if you just take it on its own, it's really good and really worth watching. It fits into content that you might be consuming in this day and age, right? It works for that. Let it be its own thing.
Yeah, and I thought like they give you kind of the backstory that is necessary to enrich what happens in the kind of general forward movement of the plot. So like we get the one character we haven't mentioned too much is the Nadine Cross character, where we do get enough of her backstory that Randall Flagg was kind of always courting her in some sort of spiritual threatening realm, to where she was she like technically a virgin even still at this whatever age she was when she's
supposed to be.
And like she knew somehow that she was destined for him in this way, to have, I don't know if it was to have his kid or whatever, but there was this kind of a sexual link between them. And then again with his manipulative machinations and stuff, so like Randall Flagg gets to Harold. It's like, so ultimately we kind of are introduced to Harold. It's almost like he could go either way, to where he's with Fran and he's with our group in the free zone, and there's also this kind of dichotomy of like they're kind of forming a democracy and kind of certain sort of people governing themselves and electing, whereas everything in New Vegas is just anarchy and complete fealty to Flagg. And and Flagg basically gets to Harold, and he does so. He finds his sort of weakness as this lonely kid who's like not able to have the woman he wants, but then Nadine Cross comes into the picture, who is, also beautiful and desirable, and that's a big part of her personality and her experience, and then ultimately her power. And because I think he says at one point in one of the scenes, in one of the recaps I saw Flagg say, like, I've got the weapon. He tells Nadine, referring to Harold. You just have to pull his trigger. And so then they start this thing where she manipulates him sexually. It's basically telling him, and I remember this from the book, she's like, we can do anything you want except this one thing, because I'm safe for the dark man.
That one
that
little
way.
thing, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's playing out in Boulder. Even I think when people are sent over as spies, right, to look at Flagg, I can't remember. And Dana Jurgens is one of those. That's such an exciting scene where this person who's experienced all this trauma. That's that one moment I remember too, like when she because doesn't she kill that trucker guy, her captor, kind of savagely,
I think so, yeah.
Yes, I think she's the one who does that. Yeah.
Bone-chilling, like cathartic scream. Oh, Jesus. But anyway, fast forward to like her being a part of the group and all this, and when they're trying to kind of, so Stu, Glenn Bateman, Fran, Larry Underwood, I think that's all, and maybe Harold. Yeah, Harold too, or maybe not, are part of that council that are like kind of making decisions for the free zone, and they have like town hall meetings and stuff where people can weigh in, and that's where even Harold kind of pitches his thing, where he kind of lays his trap and where he flashes that smile that he's learned. And but anyway,
and
so
he nominates them to become the leaders.
Yeah,
so,
to basically
trying to keep them all in the same space, so he can get them all together.
Exactly. And by this point, he's working with Nadine to make that happen. He's in league with the Dark Man. But like, so they're trying to pick who's going to go and be spies. And so it was inspiring, like the people that are volunteering for that ultimately. So it's like the judge, who was the judge a female in the book? I can't remember. I feel like it wasn't.
In the book and the miniseries, I believe, were an elderly black man.
Oh, okay.
So definitely in the miniseries was an elderly black man. I can't remember. I know it was a
in
man
the miniseries. They had to recast the elderly black man in the miniseries because he died halfway through. The original person died after like filming only half of it, or maybe something like that. Oh. But the person they cast was the real life husband of the woman who played Mother Abigail. And he got the part. Oh. He got the part because he was in the right place at the right time, because it just so happened that he was an actor visiting his wife playing Mother Abigail on set, and had been like, they said the whatever video we were watching was like, he got the part because he was around all the time, because he was always there, because his wife was playing the role. And and so that's how he got the part.
Right, Ruby Dee, and then her husband is I think it's Ozzie Davis. Yeah, Ozzie Davis. And that's so cool. And they've been in a bunch of stuff together over the years. And then like they play. Oh, that's so cool. I mean, it's a neat. That's how. Well, it's not neat, but
it's a fun fact. Yeah,
nice
it's
one
of those like one of those interesting factoids. Based on how it worked out for sure.
But yeah, so it's that was inspiring how the Judge Harris is a female here, and she's basically volunteering to go into the lion's den, and then Dana Jurgens like lays it out. It's like, so you want me to do this, this, and this? Like she kind of lays out how. Now this is borderline suicide mission.
How ridiculous this is.
Yeah, but the way she puts it is like, you want me to do this, this, and this? Kind of what you would expect a person to be like, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, absolutely not. But when she says it all, and like you take her character and what that character's been in stride, and she's like, I'm in. And then you're just like, she's in. And and then Tom Cullen goes out there. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and like that. when he has no, so in the book and the 90s miniseries, they hypnotize him to get him, like to give him all those instructions.
Yeah.
And in this one, they just kind of lay it out for him. And when
it
that
works.
scene when he's leaving and like he's riding his bike around all happy and circles around them and all of them are sad and you know what he's getting ready to go do and you're just like, oh, that is gut-wrenching. That scene is really hard for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, everything with him is so emotional. And I think, I forgot about the hypnotism part. And then the fact that he is willing to do it. Yeah, the bravery of all of that is so
It's
so
very well
moving.
cast, too.
Yeah.
The actor who plays him is very well cast. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting, too, we were talking about like how people's, previous roles inform, how you think about them. I'd only ever seen that actor, Brad William Henke, and Me, You, and Everyone We Know, this little indie film where he plays a kind of questionable character, honestly, like a little bit of creepy. Like there's these very young girls who are exploring their sexuality and wanting to kind of tease him, and he's interested, which is kind of creepy. So anyway, so I had this kind of association with him that wasn't necessarily terrible because he plays a kind of an innocent anyway. And Greg Kinnear too, like one of my favorite movies is As Good as It Gets, and I love him in that film. But another one of the Bride's favorite movies I really like is Ghost Town, in which he plays a real shitty guy. So I had both of those in my head, and I've seen him do both. Anyway, but yeah, so the casting of that Tom Cullen, it's like I didn't have entirely good associations with him, but I think from now, it'll be hard for me to see it as anything other than this like really wonderful character. And I think that he like to see the actor himself talk. I saw him a little behind the scenes thing today. Not terribly dissimilar, it's not like he's slow or anything like Tom Cullen is or faces all the same challenges, but I don't know. You could see of kind of like how this guy informed some of those more cognizant choices in a really strong way.
he played a character in the adaptation of Choke.
I've never seen that.
Which is a Chuck Palahniuk book,
Yeah.
the same guy that wrote Fight Club, and that's where I had remembered him from when I saw him. He played a habitual masturbator. And, he's the best friend of the main character in Choke, so he's the best friend of another guy that I really like.
Is that the what was Sam Rockwell, or am I thinking of something else?
Sam Rockwell, yeah.
Oh, maybe.
So Sam Rockwell is the main character, and this guy plays his best friend, who also happens to be like, he'll just randomly be standing there, like in the movie and the book, where the main character was talking about how he looks over, he's like trying to get advice from his best friend, and he looks over and he's just like rubbing one out, just like his hand down his pants. He's like, stop doing that. This is serious. Like shit. Like, like, sorry, I can't help it. That's his response. Sorry, I can't help it. So we've sent everybody. We've gotten up to the point that they're sending spies out to the West, and it's really that is culminating all to the end, because it goes about as we would expect, right? Like each one of those spies are systematically picked off. The judge is unceremoniously killed, and they bring Dana Jurgis up all the way to Flagg's, because she makes it up into the echelon, right? She's with Lloyd Henry and the woman who Nick Andros and Tom Cullen had met on the road. And
Julie Lowry. When I first saw her, I gotta admit, I was like, oh, hello.
Yeah.
Something about that type.
She's cute, but she's evil.
Exactly.
Those dirty blondes, man. They are, yeah. And so, anyway, it all goes exactly how you would expect. Like, Randall Flagg knows exactly who is spying. At least he knows two of them, because his whole thing is don't kill them, because I know there's a third one, but I can't see them, meaning you can't tap into their brain. and we realize that's because of Tom Cullen, and his brain is different than everybody else's brain. And so he tells Dana's the first one. She actually successfully stabs him in the neck, right? Like, which is different because in the 90s miniseries.
But that doesn't kill him.
Still doesn't kill him.
Yeah.
And does she commit suicide? Does she like jump? Like, I forget how what she does.
Isn't she the one who kills herself with a bottle?
Oh yeah, she breaks the bottle and then stabs herself in the neck to give him like. So he's pissed because he didn't get it out of her who the third one is, and so he knows it's the judge, and he sends Henry out to he's like, you know, you can't kill this one because we need her to get who the third one is, and so the guys that Lloyd picks are trigger happy and killer, and so that pisses Randall Flagg off. And there's a couple instances where you think that Tom's going to get found out because he's poking just a little too close, because also Mother Abigail tells them they have to go, like that the committee, which is Stu and all the characters we love basically, who are left after the bombing, who go out to Las Vegas. And
there's one new one, right? Ray Bretner, like that.
Ray.
She's an American Indian woman in this. I don't remember that from the book, or am I just not remembering that from the book?
I don't know. I can't remember how
it was definitely a white man in the miniseries.
Yeah.
So
that felt
might
different.
have been a white man in the book too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of they do. I mean, it's just a nice thing to kind of spread things out and have different types of folks, but also a different sort of character. And there's a great beat where they're having this walk, because Mother Abigail tells him, like, you got to go on foot, and not all of you are going to make it. This plays into my thing too, where when some stuff happens later, it's like, I actually, with the way that my brain is and stuff and what I retain after a certain age or period in time, it seems, I didn't remember who did and didn't make it for sure. So some of the things where people were in jeopardy, I was like, oh fuck. Or I was thinking too, like, are they going to change this for TV? Because I wasn't super sure if it was going to be a limited series or continue on. And especially when we get to the well thing, I was just like, is this the way of like continuing the anyway? So, but there's a nice beat with that Ray character where they're walking out there and they're trying to something strategy wise, or, you know, needing to understand how something about something to where her character goes like, oh, so the Indian girl is supposed to be close to the earth and help you find water so you don't shit yourselves to death. And then they look at her and they're like, well, can you? And she's like, of course.
Yes, I can do all those things.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was one character who I think was new and is part of that little group to go out west that Mother Abigail tells them need to go.
Yes. And really added a lot of those moments, I feel like, to the story. Like, she was humorous when she needed to be, and like impactful in the way that she was used in the scenes.
Yeah, and she ends up being the one with Larry, like in the pool as
in the pool,
final sacrifice, we think.
Yeah.
And we have he confronts Nadine Cross. Lloyd kills Glenn Bateman.
Yeah, in the judge in the courtroom, that was one of the things that struck me the most. I don't remember that as much about the book, but that was really where we're starting to see this thing. Like, I have a couple more notes here than I do for probably anything else, so I'll just make a point to talk about it. So Glenn Bateman says, making a public display of all those who defy him, that's not strength. So like Glenn and who else? They're all like, they're basically on trial with like what they call that rat woman, and Lloyd Henry is like, and it's almost like a reality TV show, but there is that thing too where Flagg wants them alive, but this is where we start to get at, you know, they're all in orange like jumpsuits like prisoners, and I have this quote here, so all they have to do is renounce the witch and her lies. Must be the judge talking, like the Randall Flagg's judge, and pledge allegiance to the one true motherfucking king. Calling their stride. Yeah, they keep calling their side the good side. You know, they're this whole thing about like these are the bad people. These people in the orange jumpsuits. The court is convened under the authority of Randall Flagg, the great purveyor of justice in the world, the greatest purveyor of justice the world has ever known, is what the judge says.
It's
and then,
very,
yes, this, I think you see where I'm going with this. It felt very 2020.
well, there was I feel like, because you've brought up a couple times too, like the diversity that's happening with like the Mother Abigail side, and I felt like there was a definite overt vein of racism with Randall Flagg's group of people. Like they were not as diverse and like
I agree.
very white.
I agree.
Very I mean, I know we're getting towards like the he who shall not be named. But they even like there's a couple MAGA hat, like I saw MAGA hats.
That's what I thought in that group. Yeah, like it didn't say it, but it was red and everything, right?
Yeah, like all of that, and I think it was a direct call out to some of this stuff that has happened recently in our past. And
you can see Glenn getting to them as he's trying to basically say like, you guys are being mind fucked, you're being hoodwinked by this guy. And the last thing he says before Lloyd shoots him, because they're like, because the judge and Lloyd, they're noticing that as Glenn is speaking up and kind of saying some of these things, that the people that have been loyally adherent to Flagg are starting to question, like, oh man, this guy's making a little bit of sense, or what if this is true, what he's saying, and the judge and Lloyd, they're like, no, we got to shut this shit down, but we can't kill him. And then Glenn goes, without your without your adulation, he's nothing. And then Lloyd shoots him in the head because he's like, oh fuck, he's gonna find out, I got to stop this. And he kills him. And of course that's Lloyd's undoing too, because so that's like all of this like thing that Randall Flagg has built out of fear and deception. When when it's being exposed, he's not able to fucking levitate. Like it is all this thing. It's what Glenn says. Yep. And it's basically if you see this guy for what he's really doing and the ways in which he's trying to deceive you for his own ends, like if you just let that all go, he loses his power. And he's killed for that. But like it's powerful, and it's the kind of, it's what I always wanted to, this is spoilers for Walking Dead. It's what I always wanted to happen with the Negan storyline based on this. I just wanted them to be like, expose them, and for the people to kind of realize we don't have to adhere to this shit. And it is this ultimate sort of good and evil, that the good in people will win out. And we do kind of see that here. It doesn't happen in the Negan storyline, but anyway, so I was really moved by all of that. And it does all happen in like the 70s book, but it did have a particular resonance last year, and even still.
I really like the way it just wrapped up that whole story. And the one thing that is telling is like, you know, it all comes down the same way. Trash Can Man is what ultimately is the undoing on that, because he brings the atomic bomb in, and then the hand of God comes down and sets it off basically. And one video commentary that we watched was basically like, and all that redemption that we see happening across New Vegas doesn't mean anything, because they all die anyways. And like all those people who are like deciding, but the whole point of them, it's not a matter of them realizing what they're doing was wrong and then getting to live about that. They're still going to have consequences about the choices that they made. The problem, but what they did was, because of them realizing what they were doing was wrong, that took the power away from Flagg and let that problem come in. And physically, you learn that just like he couldn't see Tom Cullen, he couldn't read Trash Can Man all the way and know that Trash Can Man was coming back. I just would have liked to see more of that Trash Can Man, like the way they let the story of that character spin out in the '90s miniseries. I think that I would have liked to have that character have gotten that same level of freedom or length of exposure, just because this was a good take on that character. When he sets that bomb off and he's like in the straps and naked and
jerking off,
rubbing one out, and like that screechiness and just like all of that stuff. It's like, again, it's played so well because you despise him. You're creeped out by him. So
yeah,
it's true.
Well, I guess the one story beat we maybe left out was the Nadine does come out there to Las Vegas, and she gets pregnant with Flagg's kid, and basically that's where it takes a real turn for me too, to where she looks like Coraline or something. Like there's a real like it gets real dark reality, real fast. And the reality of the whole thing starts to because a lot of it's just like human drama, but then you get out there and he's like levitating, and she looks so heavily made up, and then there's the lightning thing and all that. So I just kind of had to accept that. But so like as she looks like the bride of death essentially, physically. Yep. And then as she's going into labor, like she knows something's wrong. She starts to sense that maybe that this is not going to end well. Like whatever she's giving birth to is not good for anyone, including her. And she throws herself out the window, and Flagg is pissed about that. And then, so also, Lloyd, but before she leaves Colorado, Lloyd and her have gathered everyone and tried to blow them all up. And a lot of people do die, including Nick Andrews and stuff. But anyway, so the Dean's gone. Everything's like coming to a head in Las Vegas, but it is that turn that Palmer mentions. We've kind of danced around, but just for people who never watch it, Glenn's killed in the courtroom. Larry and Ray are brought to the sort of pool where people are made to fight to the death, etc. And they just start repeating the prayer, like I will, I think it's that, whatever, I can't remember where through the valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. And they keep saying that until the people, just like in the courtroom, it kind of catches on, and then the crowd that's meant to gather to watch them die also starts to say, I will fear no evil, in unison. And that's what truly strips Flagg of his supernatural power, and then the lightning happens and the trash can man comes and everything fucking blows up. And Stu is out in the Stu didn't make it to Vegas because he fell down and broke his leg, and he's in a canyon, which I think is what saves him from that sort of atomic blast, is that he's in that canyon. And that's when he was there, and Glenn leaves him and he gives him the pills and stuff, and he's like, if you take 3 of these, it might be fatal. You get me East Texas, the pain medication. That's where I couldn't remember. I'm like, I can't remember if Stu survives this. I can't remember if he does, if that's just it for him, because Mother Abigail says you won't all come back. The story is set up.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, obviously I had never seen the original, so I didn't know what was coming, but I truly was believing going into that last episode that was the end of Stu, that was it.
Yep.
So I really love the way that they tie those character arcs together and bring Tom back together.
Yes, my heart's beating. I was like, someone take us through it when Tom
and Tom Cullen and Tom Cullen did exactly he remembered everything he was supposed to do. If there's more than one, you run. If there's only one, you have to kill him. And he hid himself under bodies and got out of the city. He could read the writing on the wall and got out of the city and all that.
And then to find Cujo,
Kojak.
Yeah. Then to find Kojak.
Cujo would have been a different story.
Different dog. Stephen King
not have gone well.
Different dog.
But for Kojak to find him and for them then to help get back to it, just it was very beautiful.
Yeah,
how that all
ended. And that's in the book, because they do that over the winter. They're traveling back to Colorado over the winter, and so it's him and Tom Cullen basically for 2 months, like the last 2 months of Fran's pregnancy, because they come back on, just like in this, they arrive back on the night that she's giving. Well, no, she already has the baby when they get
She
back.
has the baby when they come back
yeah.
in the movie. In the
But
mini,
they
the
come
CBS.
back like on the evening that Fran goes into labor. Is I think that's right. Maybe
That
not.
does kind of
Maybe-
feel right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But that story is much longer in the book, of that time of them together and his leg healing, and really that's what it is. They're hunkering down for the winter long enough for his leg to mend so that they can ride bikes back.
Oh,
and like make the journey back. So
yeah.
Okay.
It's just so beautiful though how it's done, because like he just comes down through there and like saves
The red
day.
mist, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
it's very
maybe
cool.
like we didn't know what happened to Tom either. I can't remember. Like I was surprised to see him and surprised for Stu to survive basically when those things happened. One thing I remember about the miniseries is that's where Stephen King himself appears on camera when Stu comes back to the camp. Because like I remember this thing, I think it's in the miniseries, but in the book too, where he's kind of a legend at this point, and it's been a long time. So him coming back and telling the people that are like guarding it or whatever at the gates or something, it's like, I'm Stu Redmond. I think there's a little bit of a doubt of like, I don't know that you are, as opposed to them like recognizing him right off the bat and stuff. And I think one of the people that played the guards in the miniseries in '94 was Stephen King himself. But yeah, it wraps up like the events of the book wrap up and stuff. And so I remember going into that last episode, what's it called? The circle closes. That's where I'm thinking to myself, like, I think we've gotten through the book here. So like, what else is going to happen?
Right.
And then this is the one that's written by Stephen King.
Yep.
And it brings us to the last thing that we haven't talked. So we talk about like it ends like Fran and Stu go. They have the baby, who they name Abby, right? In this,
Abigail.
Yep.
yeah, after Mother Abigail, of course. But in the book, it's just named Peter. I can't remember if it's after someone or not. But anyway, so they go back east, and that does happen. But in the TV version here, they stop off at some house. They're kind of taking their time because I feel like they're in their mind like they've made it through everything. There are no more obstacles. We don't need to be like worrying or stressing.
They stopped somewhere in like Oklahoma or something.
No, Nebraska. Yeah, I remember.
It is Nebraska.
And I think
Okay.
that's kind of like the homage back that they're going like back to the book, where Hemingford Home really was. And not to step on Dave's synopsis, but that they run into the young Abigail in this like town, this place in Nebraska that they stop.
Oh, is that where Mother Abigail initially was in Nebraska?
In the book and the miniseries, Hemingford Home is a town in Nebraska.
Ah, okay.
In this one, it's a nursing home in Colorado, right outside of Boulder.
I see.
So,
Right.
Yeah, okay. Because that is they stop there, and then there's this. I think in my note, I'm just like, who the fuck? Yeah, who the f is the young lady in the cornfield? When
It
I'm
really
watching.
freaked me out. It really freaked me out. I was like, please don't let bad things about to be happening. Like, come on, please, no bad things.
Yeah.
It was very nerving.
Yeah. And so there's like this little girl who has an ethereal. I mean, it is weird to just like have in the middle of nowhere. I don't know, what could she be, like an 8-year-old black girl with like a nightgown, and she's just in a field like out near this home where they've stopped to rest with their baby, and there's something striking about her, and just weird because like how she's surviving out here, etc. And then when I was fast forwarding through it today, so I can't quite remember. Do they get introduced to her before Stu leaves to kind of try to find supplies?
She doesn't come out of the cornfield until Franny falls down the well, and then she goes and takes care of the baby while Franny's in the well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what was your to I'll set it up and then I'll ask you how you feel about it. So basically there's no running water. Franny's like, what about tomorrow morning, Stu? That's when we shit. We got to get the water pumping.
We need water.
Yeah. But no, that's not exactly what happens. But they don't have running water, and Stu leaves, and Franny's just kind of looks at this pump, and she's like, I wonder. She's talking to Kojak. She's like, I wonder if we could get this thing going. And so she goes over and tries to kind of fix the well pump, and falls in, and it looks like a pretty rough fall. And then now she's at the bottom of this well, and she has this, I guess, dream, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that takes place in this kind of nether world with everything with Mother Abigail or Randall Flagg up into a certain point is always in this kind of dream type state anyways. And so she's kind of having another one of these, and it is Flagg and he sort of walks her through the jungle and shows her this tribe that's never been kind of encountered the modern world. And he basically tempts her, like, instead of like Jesus tempted in the desert by Satan, it's like Franny gets tempted in the jungle by Flagg, who I think Mother Abigail in another part of this dream calls him his father's son.
Yes.
Like basically intimating that
Yes.
Randall Flagg is the son of the devil. Anyway, so we sort of, I don't want to go to like through the whole thing. I mean, I guess somebody does. So one of you guys pick it up. So she's down there, she's getting tempted. What happens next?
She's desperate. She's hopeless. She thinks that that's the end for her.
And all he wants is a kiss, right? Like that's like,
and to
he
peek
said,
through
all
her
you have
eyes
to
from
do is-
time to time.
and to peek through her eyes from time to time.
Small
And
ask.
so-
That's a small ask.
and she leans in to kiss him, and then like almost bites his bottom lip off.
Yeah.
And says she'll never do it. And then she's almost doesn't it happen like she's almost instantly then transported to like this cornfield or back to the cornfield or
Back to Mother
something,
Abigail,
but
right?
that's where,
Back to Mother Abigail,
Mother Abigail, yeah, but it's
Who's
but
died
it's
at this
actually
point.
Mother Abigail,
Yeah.
who has died, but she's telling her whole future, like you're gonna have like all these kids, and they're gonna have kids, and they're gonna be like, and it's gonna be awesome, and
Repopulate the
they're
earth.
gonna be
Yeah.
repopulate the earth, and
Which is pretty awesome.
yep. So, and that's when she comes back to reality at that point, and the young version of Abigail, which I
That's how I
So I
read it
like
too. Yeah. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's just how it was supposed to be. I'm not sure I put that together the first time, that it was like some. I also wondered, like, is she maybe like the next generation of Mother Abigail? Like, because there's that whole thing of like,
the same thing. If Flagg represents that, coming back to that tribe, that evil will always exist and you will always have to stand against it. I think it's more. The implication in the book is like they're the good in the world. Like they have the potential to be Mother Abigail, whereas like Flagg is this outside force that's influencing man. Goodness comes from man themselves because Mother Abigail just lived her life the way she felt God was supposed to, and that's how she got picked to be this good, this representation of good. I think this is more of an opportunity to like actually put a face on that if Flagg comes back and it's because evil will always exist. Like there will always be a Mother Abigail because good is also there. Like the potential for good is also there.
yeah, I like that. Yeah.
That's my take on it anyways, is that he's just explicitly giving now that good goes on forever too. So it worked for me. I like that they made it back to Maine. I like that, she's talking about, like, she shares her vision, that they're going to have all these kids and they're going to repopulate the earth.
Yeah, I liked as I said, I liked the kind of the whole thing and why I resisted watching or revisiting the other adaptations, because I just really wanted this one to kind of live in my mind for a while, and it did feel so much like the book. This one, this deviation, it felt odd. It felt like this was the one written by Stephen King, and it did feel like his new update, right? So it was like, this was initially written in like the mid-70s, came out in 1978. When it came to paperback, it was updated and the events were like pushed up in terms of like the timeline and even the references. And then again in 1990, when it was republished as this complete uncut edition, where a lot of the stuff was put back, the references were again updated and kind of he had a chance to really revise it, and it ended with this same way with Flagg in the tribe that he retained for this. Curious to see how because 1994 then everything was updated yet again for the circumstances. It's like and I think it's the girl who played Julie Lawler or whatever in one of the behind the scenes thing was talking about how there are people that kind of, it is in some ways it's like this living document, and King keeps kind of revisiting it or having the opportunity to, and kind of updating it and kind of refining it and stuff like that. And so this thing with the well felt a little indulgent, like it didn't need to happen, and it was kind of odd but I think I ultimately liked it. I thought it was, but it's definitely like not central to anything that happened. It was just kind of felt to me like an interesting thing that Stephen King did, and it was like so just writerly, the whole thing. So this is not like a criticism saying I think it was bad. It's interesting to me because of it. Like this one is called, so like the whole epilogue with Flagg encountering a new group of people, and the thing where he's talking about it with, and I think it's even the last line of the 1990 complete edition that is life was such a wheel that no man could stand on it for long, and it always at the end came around again to the same place. So this whole idea of the wheel turns, I think Abigail says that in the dream thing. This episode is called The Circle Closes, and there's all this, like watching it again now, there's all this imagery either from really far overhead with the well or down below looking up. Like there's an overhead shot of the well itself. You have 3 circles in one shot, and so you can just feel the heavy hand of the writer and the director trying to bring all of these themes home. So in a way it's satisfying to like look at it this way and see it all come to fruition, and to have the embodiment perhaps of Mother Abigail in this next generation, who's like flat out supernatural in this case, because she just like disappears. It's one of those things that if you watch close, does she leave footprints? It's weird too, like even with Stu, he's got a wheel, he's behind the wheel of a truck, he's held up because the wheel of the car, the tire punctures, and he's trying to change the wheel of the tire, all of these things. It's like he's turning the thing with the jack, and it's just like, and then they're really like driving all these metaphors home, and it really makes, so like he comes back, and like he never says like, who the fuck is this little girl? None of that. She's just like telling him what to do, and she goes, dog, baby, and then Kojak goes over and watches the baby, and nothing is questioned. They get Fran out of the well, and literally like, and it's like really harrowing too, like the moment, she looks like she is going to die. and then the girl just like waves her hand over,
yeah.
And Fran's fine, and it's kind of bizarre. And then, but say they do all that, I feel like, to drive home all these themes, for Fran to be confronted by this temptation to have a comfortable life, to be saved. Like she thinks, so Fran thinks she's like giving up her life to not give in to the devil, basically. And in doing so is saved by God, I guess, ultimately, like through Mother Abigail, because she's just completely healed, no pain, all this, they're going to be fine. The girl disappears. And so they make it out to Maine, and then you resume like how the book ends. And he asks her, because that is the initial way the book ends, is this kind of question between Fran and Stu about, do you think that people, the humanity will make it? And she's like, I don't know, kind of, will we destroy ourselves ultimately once we all rebuild? That's how it ends. And in this case too, so that it's a little bit more hopeful with that kind of edge then of that epilogue of him coming back and it all starting again. But she says then, like, he asks her, he's like, what happened in Nebraska? And she's like, I was basically down at the bottom of this well. I don't know if I wrote it out, but she basically is like, I was down there and I realized that there is two sides to the world. There's like this, she's saying, like them sitting on the beach, and there's this deep, dark well of, that's what she called it. She saw, so down there I saw them both. And I guess she said she made a choice. But so like even her saying that, like she was literally in the bottom of a deep dark well. So it's just like, so it's kind of great in a way, but at the same time it's a little bit, it was just kind of, I could see why he did it. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed like digging into it. It was kind of fun as a filmmaking exercise, but I'm not so sure it was great. But maybe it was worth it to drive home those ideas and get that, because that too, you don't have to set up, like they also lay the track of who this tribe is and what are the stakes here, the good and evil, and this is, it all happened before, it'll all happen again. Once in every generation, a plague comes among them, and so it's cool.
Is the tribe that he visits, that Randall Flagg and what's her face visit together, is that the same tribe that he's transported to at the very end of the movie?
I think yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah. So the one clip that I saw Stephen King talking about that ending that he wrote for this new miniseries, he said he wanted to write an ending, like an extended ending for the first one, for the 91 or 93 whenever
really?
it came out. He's like, I wanted to write this last bit of it and didn't get to, and so that's part of why he was so excited to write it for this one. So I'm wondering, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering, because we didn't finish the 91 all the way through, would the ending that they tacked onto this one, would an ending like this have fit better on the original miniseries?
Yeah, I wonder. I can't remember how that one ended.
Probably. I don't know, because the first one was so faithful to the book, so it's really like how the book ended. The ending in the book is Flagg waking up on that beach. He acknowledges that there's some primitive tribe there, and I think he says, like, you know, it's time to do it all over again or something like that. And there's not really any, but there. And you find out that Fran and Stu make it back to Algonquin. I think there might even be a talk of how, like, they helped repopulate the earth maybe a little bit. And, like, Kojak meets another dog and has puppies. You find that out in the epilogue. Right. Yeah. And, like, Big Steve, that cute. Was his name, though, in the pre-Captain.
Oh, yeah!
So, no, but, like, I don't know if it would have worked anymore. You know, this is a common debate that we have on this show, is just like, is it okay for artists to update their art like so many years down the road and just like no, I want a second go at that ending, you know, and this falls into that category.
It felt to me like it moved a little fast. I felt like it was quick. The last 3 episodes, there was so much that happened and so much story that got pushed into those last 3 episodes that I would have liked it to be a little bit more expanded, just because I found myself with more questions about, well, what happens now? Like what's, and that also is like, not to compare the original, and I know we need to wrap up. That Bell was the dog telling us that he needs to go to the bathroom. But
and the one that's sitting in the background, looking very patient at you, like, just as soon as you're done talking, Mom.
Anytime now. So I did feel like the last segment of it went a little fast. I would have liked to have that expanded more. But I also like the way that they gave most of the story of, like, all the bad stuff happened and now our story picks up and we're going to, you know, tell you going forward. Like the way that the miniseries focused so much more on the pandemic itself versus this retelling focusing more on what comes after. So I saw those differences and wanted a little bit more from the last couple of episodes, but I love the way that they tied everything up. Like you said, babe, I was very satisfied with the ending.
Yeah. It was, and again, overall, like, if you're just upset that it's not the book, then go read the book. Or if you're just upset that they deviated from the miniseries from the 90s, go watch that. As its own thing, this is very watchable. It's very consumable. It tugs at the right heartstrings and makes you like feel a little stressed at certain times, the way it should. It's good, solid entertainment for sure.
Yeah. I like that as well, and I thought it was a great use of the medium, a great translation of the story. I felt like the story was enriched. You know, it could be argued like whether things like this or remakes and stuff are really worthwhile. And like the Pet Cemetery one, I could do without.
Oh yeah,
but like this I'm glad existed. I'm glad it exists. I encourage folks to check it out if they're intrigued by it on Paramount Plus, and I think it was a worthwhile experience that I'm glad that you all encouraged me to seek out. I might have skipped it because of feeling like I didn't want to go there, but ultimately, you know, like there is evil in it, but it's a real celebration of kind of fundamental goodness. Honestly, it's like like a little kind of pretty cut and dry morality tale that I think ultimately, if you're asking me after seeing it, just thinking about this show, and actually this is my view in general, you know, about humanity, what Fran asked Stu on the beach or vice versa. I can't remember what it is. I think you know that this is like the best in humanity, and this, if we can steer into this side of ourselves as opposed to the other, then we would we're likely to still exist in another 100 years.
We'll make it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys making the time to do this. In our episode entitled "The Stand" number 12 or whatever, I think we were under really strict time limitations, and we're like, did we do justice to this epic book? I feel like we gave an epic amount of time to it today, and so we had a chance to kind of have another bite at this apple.
It was a really great chat. I
guess just to wrap it up, I don't think we've talked about anything in these terms in a long time, but and I think I know the answer, but just for formality's sake, is the 2020 edition of The Stand, as seen on Paramount Plus, a Palmer's pick?
Oh, yes, I say yes.
Yes, I say yes.
Great.
Yep.
All right.
I say yes.
Well,
Simon, your thoughts? I like terrible.
Well, I know
it's fine.
the dog have to go to the bathroom, and we've been talking forever and ever, but this was super fun. Thanks to you both.
It was really nice to spend the afternoon with you, Dave.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording because it's the only thing that'll stop me talking. And I love you guys. I hope you have a great long weekend. And happy belated anniversary.
Enjoy.
Thank you so
very much. Yeah, enjoy the weekend. Tell the bride we said hello.
I will. Okay.
Yep. Love you, buddy.
Right.
Pass on our love and have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
So there you have it. That was Long Walk Short Drink episode 90. Thank you to Palmer and Ash for spending their entire afternoon with me and talking this through. A thank you to Moto for his rockin' theme song. Be sure to check out his EP, Red Eye Highway Session, under the name Fascist Puppeteer. If you'd like to write to us, you can email the show, lwsdpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, /LWSDpod. Perhaps I'll tweet my death warrant and pizza excursion there from a couple weeks ago. LWSDpod.com for show archive and other related media. I found recently there's a little search bar there. If you want to search for something like The Stand, you can. That's where you can maybe easily access those episodes 12 and 15 that would round out the conversation here. You can also, of course, find those on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And while you're there, please subscribe, rate, and review at whatever that platform is. And until next time, thank you for listening. Cheers, Long Walkers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to embark on a musical experience. An experience we like to call Steve. But we'd like to warn you, we don't claim for this to be music. It is not music. It is whammo.
What?
What's
Steve?
that?
Sean Cameron, what?
I know that kid from high school. I hated that. Whammo, what is that?
We are wearing flyers.
Yeah, I'd like to order a Big Mac, Coca-Cola, and a side order of rock and roll.
What's with the camera?
Nothing.
Put it away.
Does the government know you're working here? Hey, stay back! Stay back! It's very expensive equipment. Get out of here! In studio tonight, we have two members of the new band, Steve. They're doing a gazebo tour this summer.
If anything really big happens, then good. That's a big gift. Steve, coming at you. 2000.
The guys, do you think you'd be as close as friends with them now?
Probably a little closer.
Probably
There's
a little
been some
closer.
tension.
I was gonna say, I want to
Enough with the note! Beloved sweet baby Jesus!
Those first couple weeks turned me off like that because of that. Thinking, hey, these people don't want me in there. And so after a while, I got actually kind of just, discouraged. I got turned off by it. I was like, oh, screw them.
The band has been a bit more frustrating than I expected. Because we have such a limited amount of time to do stuff. We have to prioritize, and the priorities are often different.
Dave's too much of a perfectionist.
It's just not fun for me because it doesn't, like, I hear it and it's like, oh, this sucks. Like, I hear the music, like, it's not working.
They had their songs, they had their parts, and we're gonna play these freaking parts over and over every damn day, every chance we had, because we had Katie's party in a week. Now, if we're not perfect in that week, I swear to God, I'm gonna kill myself. I was like, holy shit, what are you guys doing?
We don't have the illusion that, like, Steve will continue on and we're going to pursue record contracts. We're going to have it. Well, see that right there. This is what I'm saying.
Rolling, here we go.
We're all friends since we were like 5, and we grew up in the same town, but now we kind of are spread out all over the United States. We don't get a chance to play together very often. For some reason, we feel that it's important enough to make the effort to get together and be creative.
Just like to remind people, it's not music. It's who I am.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed Steve! The greatest musical band